Okay, so I grew up in an old house in the south, kind of in the middle of nowhere. The house was laid out somewhat circular, as you could walk from the living room through most other rooms just by walking in a complete circle and ending up back where you started. When I was around 5, me and my younger sister were chasing each other in circles while my mum cooks dinner. I was in front of her and we were laughing and carrying on. When we got into the dining room, in the inside was a corner with a greenish creature in a dark coat or something. It had pointy ears and sharp teeth which stuck out. I was young and I was still very small, but I'd say this thing was 2 feet tall. It kind of looked like it had been at the bottom of the pond or something, very old and tattered. It then puts its fingers to its lips and starts grinning. I slammed to a stop, and my sister was chasing so close that she ran into me, which pushes us to the ground around the corner into the kitchen. We both started screaming, and my mum ran to see what was wrong, but the thing was gone. This actually haunts me. I'm 25 now, and although I've done lots of research, I've never found anything that really fits what I saw. For a long time I thought maybe I'd imagined it, but my sister was seeing it too. Now, it really terrifies me. I literally have no idea what this thing could have been. This story involves myself, then 20, and my girlfriend, then 18, in the middle of nowhere town in North Carolina. I was with my best friend at the time, and I had nowhere to go and was saving up for an apartment for my own reasons due to irrelevance to this story. And my girlfriend typically stayed the night with me as well, as we had the entire basement bedroom to ourselves, and he didn't really mind as we're all close and still are to this day. I was a pretty heavy smoker at that time and went outside to take my habit away from the house, to which my girlfriend would follow to partake as well. So like any other time, I would grab my lighter from the bedside table and go to head out into his driveway, and this was a fairly common practice for me. For context on this place, my friend lived in the middle of nowhere, really surrounded by forests, country roads and farms. He had a pretty sizable yard in front of the road which led to some dense trees, and the only place really open around these parts was a gas station that you could walk down into in about 5 minutes. Anything else was a good 15 to 20 minute drive away. Anyway, as I headed out, my girlfriend's behind me, with her and I having a pretty light-hearted conversation, inside jokes and whatnot, before something catches my eye near the vehicle which is parked under the old oak tree near the centre of his yard in the driveway. I'm sure everybody knows the feeling of trying to focus on something that you feel isn't supposed to be there, so you tune out everything else around you. Well, that's what was going on. Besides my car, there was something crouched down, akin to how a cat or dog would sit. It was about 11 PM, so it was dark and the porch light wasn't reaching far enough to get in, but I could kind of make it out. It had long arms, and despite being in front of it, the elbows actually poke out behind. There was no visible hair that I could see. It had a large balloon-type head, and I guess pointy ears, but I can't really tell. I'm not really sure about the size of this thing, but I was a small distance away, and it was crouched down beside my vehicle. But it looked like if it stood up, it could be about my height. As soon as I started to piece everything together, I was staring at it and I realised that my girlfriend began questioning me, calling out my name and walking to the side. Instinctively, I blocked her with my arm and told her to get back in as I continued staring at this thing which made no effort to turn and look at us, remaining unmoved. She gave a sort of laugh, assuming I was messing with her, which isn't unlike me, until she began trying to look at whatever it was. She then manages to catch the slightest of glimpse at it, and I remember her saying, "What's that?" I had no words to answer her with though, but this confirmed what I was seeing was definitely real. In a panic, we both start backing towards the door, still garnering no reaction from the thing, at my car until eventually we get to the door, fumbling for the knob and getting inside. After inside, she asked me what is it, and I still have no idea. After we head back down to the basement, she decides to sketch what she had seen to get a better description of it, and it's exactly what I saw. A few minutes later, I'm looking at it again on paper. A balloon or bulbous type head, long arms and everything. Now, it's been a good 5 years since then, and we moved out to our own apartment, so I'm doubtful she still has the drawing, but I really don't know what that thing was that day. On this particular night, the occurrence happened back in March of 1991. I only remembered this because my father, a police officer, was working a lot of overtime on a security detail to cover for a workers' strike at one of the New York daily news facilities in the industrial section of town in New Jersey, about 20 minutes west of Manhattan. It was a Saturday night, and I've just gotten home in time for my 11 p.m. curfew. I was a month shy of 14, and was surprised and happy to see my father on the couch catching up on a stack of newspapers. As I was expecting him to be working overtime, I sat on the couch with him and spoke for a little bit while there's a TV show on. After catching up, we turned our attention to TV, and that's when I saw it. Off to the right of the couch while we're sitting there, in my peripheral vision, this thing is tiptoeing about 6 feet from me, by the fireplace towards the foyer door. Just as it was about to go out of view from where I was sitting, I turned my head in time to capture the back of this creature. It was around 18 inches tall, bipedal and humanoid built, with the exception of its legs, which kind of look like 4 animal legs if it's walking on its hind legs only. It swayed its arms and walked like any human would, and was covered head to toe in very short, tiny brownish hair. It was not clothed and had no towel. I only caught sight of it for around a second before it went out of view. I did not clearly see its face as it was walking away from us, though when I initially caught it in the corner of my eye, I was under the impression that it didn't have a snout or muzzle or close to a human's face. The one thing that stood out was that it seemed like it was sneaking, not scurrying, but deliberately tiptoeing, like it didn't want to be seen or heard. Anyway, I'm sitting there for a second trying to process what I just witnessed when I turned to my left to bring this to my father's attention to see him staring at the exact same spot where the goblin turned the corner, completely in disbelief. I say to him, "Did you see it?" And he says, "Oh, what a rat." All I could say is rats don't walk on their legs like that. At this point, he grabs his light and we proceed to lift, pull, flip over furniture trying to find evidence of it. We check the chimney fume, the fireplace which was closed, and all of the windows and doors are locked, and there are no holes in the walls. There's nowhere for it to get in or out. The only thing we succeeded in doing was waking up my mum and sister and getting yelled at. Now, I'm not one to worry if someone thinks that I'm crazy, but I seriously have no idea what this could have been. I kind of hope that somebody else had had something similar to this. I just don't know what to think of it. I'd like to share an interesting story with all of you, one that I feel is rather unique compared to most, and hopefully I'll get an answer to this. So my story starts when I was about 11 years old in 2002 in southern CA. My mother had found a new boyfriend who lived up in the mountains. You see, I'd lived in the city for most of my life and was excited to hear that he lived in practically the middle of nowhere. Now, I always get closer to animals than people, and I know that guy has 2 ponies in the property, so the idea of meeting a new animal was enough for me to go along for a visit. A few months passed, and every so often my mother and I would visit his home. As I got familiar with the place and the animals, they would sometimes leave me alone for an hour or so to go outside on a date. maybe that would seem insane nowadays, but I was perfectly fine with being alone. My mother, however, had one rule for me: never to leave the property, and if somebody came by that I didn't know, that I'd have to get inside and wait until we came home. This is where the story starts. So my mother had left with her boyfriend almost half an hour ago, and I was bored with staying inside, so decided to go and spend some time with the ponies. Now, there was two of them. One was called Cinnamon and the other called Colt. Not very original, I know, but that's what they were called. Usually when I came over, the two of them would wait by the fence until I come over to play with them, but today I noticed that Cinnamon wasn't there. I chalked it up to her probably being in the stable, and went inside over to Colt to pet him for a few minutes. That's when things get weird. I heard a whiny of sort sound coming from the forest. I looked over to the forest edge and could easily see from the house to the forest without anything getting in the way, and what I saw standing there looked like Cinnamon. She stood there, almost motionless, staring directly at me. Colt then passed and seems to notice that I was looking. Soon, looking in the same direction, he starts snorting and pawing at the ground. I've never seen him behave like this before, but I looked up to the forest and noticed Cinnamon was walking in. I was worried that she had gotten out and got lost, so my childlike mind thought that the only thing to do was to give chase and try and get her back. I then ran into the forest looking for her, but it oddly seemed as though that she's just out of reach whenever I spot her. This is where the odd encounter is, and which I'm curious to get closure upon. Soon I couldn't see Cinnamon anywhere. She was gone, no longer any trace of her. I looked around and realised that I was now lost in the woods and had no way of finding my way back. That's when I heard it. It sounded like two dogs mauling each other. I was terrified at this point. As soon as the sounds are really close, they go into screams, and it really haunts me even now. As I stood there stuck in terror, I noticed something in the corner of my eye peeking from around a tree. I shakily look over and saw what appears to be a deer looking at me. However, I can't see most of its body. It was almost like it stood on two legs, standing there trying to hide but be seen just enough. I was afraid and confused by what's happening. The deer was looking like Cinnamon did, but its mouth fell open, and I heard it whisper, "Are you lost?" Its mouth didn't move as it spoke, just stayed open slack. Even though I was terrified out of my mind, I nodded. It hadn't moved an inch as it spoke again. "Follow me," it said, whispering. It moved behind the tree, hiding itself, but then I noticed it peer from behind a different tree that was further down the path. Vividly, I remembered that I had no idea where I was or what this creature was, but I had no choice but to follow it. Every time I got closer to it, though, it would hide and appear behind another tree moments later. Never once did I see it walk from another tree. It felt like hours had gone by, even as the light in the forest faded quickly. I was still led by this creature through the forest. Finally, the creature peered around one last tree, with its mouth opening, saying, "Go home." I could see that this is where it hid, and just behind it is my home. The flashing of blue and red lights can actually be seen from in front of the house. I stopped to look again. Now when I get home, my mum is crying and the police were there. I was punished for leaving the house, and later my mum broke up with that partner, not because of the incident, mind you, but I never got to return to that place, nor did I ever encounter the creature again. This memory's always bothered me, as I chalked it up to being terrified, but I don't know if it could have been a skinwalker somehow helping me. I really don't know what it could have been. So about a month ago, I was heading home from work around midnight. As I exited the freeway to get on this 28-mile stretch of highway, I could see police lights as I passed the cops at around 60 miles per hour. I sped up to my normal 80 miles per hour. I drove about 5 miles and I could see a blinking orange light. As I approached it, the light was blinking on some kind of shopping cart or stroller. As I look up to see what was pushing the cart way out in the middle of nowhere, I see a face that reminds me of the girl from The Exorcist. Maybe I was going really fast, but the face. Now, it was miles away from the cops or anything else, plus it was over 100 degrees outside. I don't know. Now, today my wife tells me that on her way home this morning at 6 a.m, she was looking at this roadkill, just telling herself that it didn't look like normal coyotes, which are smaller and grey. When she actually passes it, she can see a little bright white person frozen next to it like it was trying not to be seen. When it noticed that she saw it, it leaps into the bushes and disappears. She said it was white, like a paper white humanoid, or one of those creepy dolls, about 6 inches and blurry. I've always felt weird on that highway, almost as though I can feel the deaths of the natives that once lived there. Now, I'm not sure whether it's a portal or something. I've always felt so weird though driving on that highway. I don't know if anybody's experienced anything similar to this before. I had a pretty weird experience that I wanted to share with everyone. Not just as a warning, but I just want to get your take on how I dealt with it and if I did the right thing. This wasn't just one incident, it was a few. So, I worked a few different jobs. One was as a store manager, and one was as a forest service worker. Now my job wasn't like your typical park ranger one. I basically just had to do tree surgery or tree maintenance. I wasn't just a maintenance guy though, because I was actually trained to do CPR and other life-saving things if I ever had to do it. So I was a little bit more skilled, I guess, than just a typical groundskeeper, but a lot of my job was just to care for the trees and stuff. Now this job always become a lot harder while working in winter. That was because of a plethora of reasons. One is, well, the trees are dying and they can easily break. Two, the area that I worked in had an issue where homeless people would sometimes take them down to make fires and stuff elsewhere. I mean, you'd have like an ancient tree sitting there. You come back a little bit later on, even in the same day sometimes, and you'd find that thing completely destroyed. I'm not a massive tree guy too, just I found it quite annoying. To be honest, in winter we didn't really have to worry about the fires because of course, how's a fire going to spread out there? So yeah, we just took our time to focus on other things. Now, as I said, I had a few jobs. Sometimes when I wasn't working there, I'd also be a store manager. Now, I remember while working in my store one day, it was pretty late and we had a weird person come in. One of the girls was actually getting quite scared of him. Apparently it was just a weird guy. He used to say really weird and creepy things to them. The thing was, virtually every time that I went out there, he would have been long gone, so I didn't really know whether to believe them or not. I felt like they were just using it as an excuse sometimes to do other things. We didn't have cameras too, so there's no way I could really check on it, but I did take their word on it. I asked them to describe this person, and they said, well, basically like a homeless person who would lurk around. I told them that if they saw him coming again, that they should make sure they lock the doors and don't let him in and just call me. The problem was, this happens sometimes, and it was when I wasn't actually at the store. It's while I was out in the forest, and I told them, no, call when I'm there, I can't do anything now. It's kind of funny thinking of it, but I guess they were quite creeped out. You know what really annoyed me most about it? The other management did not care. I mean, literally, they wouldn't do a single thing to try and improve this or stop it being a problem. And that didn't go well with me. I thought, God, I'm basically doing everything here. I did it because it made some extra money. The forest job didn't pay too well. However, I had a weird thing happen. I was there one night basically doing the night shift. It was a cold winter night, so you don't see so many people now. Normally it's quite peaceful, to be honest, and you can just enjoy like your coffee and just looking out. Now, we weren't really supposed to drink them, but everybody did. I mean, hey, it's a night shift. How are you meant to get through it otherwise? So yeah, that's what we were doing. Now we had a look around and we didn't see anyone. The other worker says goodnight and goes off home. I was there alone now, and I noticed something. There's a glowing ember of a cigar or cigarette, I couldn't quite tell. It looked big enough to be a cigar, but it wasn't smoking like one, so I thought maybe it's just a weird cigarette or a few. I then thought, oh no, as I can see the dark hood of someone. It's more like a cloak. They look homeless and weird. Maybe I finally encountered them. I think to myself, maybe they weren't so crazy after all, the girls. And I waited. I didn't think too much was going to happen, and I was fairly confident that I was going to be able to harm myself if it decided that it was going to go down. I also had a small weapon with me. I mean, it's just a pocket knife, but that thing feels much bigger when you're in a dangerous situation. So I waited. It seems like this guy is kind of just scouting at me and just slowly watching me. He kind of lurks around, then goes off into the woods, barefooted, I kid you not. His feet are disgusting. I don't understand how somebody could be out there in the cold like that, and I think, yeah, that's not normal. I actually start to doubt my own eyes and think maybe I'm seeing things, or maybe it's some kind of ghost or something. There were rumours of this road that we're on being haunted because there was a big car accident once, and the guy there apparently didn't make it and still haunts here. They say that you see him at night, but you never see him barefoot. He kind of just idly wanders at the side of the road. I was getting quite freaked out and decided to lock the door for a bit. I didn't want anyone coming in. I put the close sign up to try and calm myself down. Like I said, there wasn't any cameras in here, so I didn't have to worry too much about that. I mean, I didn't want another big boss looking over me saying, oh, why have you scared off the customers saying it's closed? But I just didn't feel safe. It's also getting terribly cold because one of the heaters has stopped working. I decide that it's my turn now to try and fix it. Now, I don't know what to do. I've took this thing apart, and to be honest, I didn't have a clue why I did that in the first place. It looked mighty dusty though, so I cleared off all of the dust. I then get a burn and a sharp pain in my arm. God, they didn't even turn this thing off and they've asked me to fix it, I say aloud. As I say this, I feel something and turn over my shoulder. I can't quite describe it, but it was almost like I had a tick and sudden urge to get an idea of my surroundings. You're just tired, man, it's nothing. And I go back to what I was doing. I still can't figure it out and it's annoying me now. But eventually I managed to get it back. So I put this thing back on and it doesn't work, so I just hit it. And immediately it comes to life and starts blowing at first cold air into my face. I can't believe that, I say to myself. You know, I was always one for hitting things or kicking them to try and get them back to life. I used to do it in the printer room in my old office all the time, and it would work like a charm. I don't know why I stopped doing it. I then stay there for a while just holding up my hands to the warm air that's slowly blowing out, and I feel quite good now. I decide to go and make another coffee. I had a cut off time actually where I wouldn't drink too much caffeine in the day because I was one who couldn't sleep very well if I had caffeine, but at this point in time I didn't really care too much. And also seeing the person earlier scared me. I start to think more and more about the very realistic possibility that I've had my first paranormal encounter. I end up sitting up on my chair, forgetting that I've got the closed sign on the door, and I slowly drift off. I had quite an intense dream. I had a problem at the time where I'd always have nightmares. I don't remember what this was exactly, but I was in some kind of nuclear power plant or something. It was creepy as heck. I was around just doing maintenance even in that dream. I mean, God, I can't get away from it. And somebody was following me. Now I slowly open up my eyes and I see there's a customer at the window. I get up quickly to see what's happening, and they seem to have vanished. Now it takes me a little while before I actually wake up enough to figure out what this is, and at first I think it's just a figure of my mind, probably linked into my dreams somehow, but I don't know. I look at the clock. God, it's only been 10 minutes. I can't believe that. I thought I'd happily slept through a big part of my shift, but I haven't. Worse, I'm not going to sleep later now, and the caffeine's done its best to keep me up. So yeah, I suppose that was the one positive of it. I go around and put on the open sign onto the other side of the window, and I want to let people know that we're open. To be honest, I was just desperate to have a normal interaction. I looked around though outside quickly, and I want to see if there's anyone out there. I can see some footprints leading into the forest and close to the window. God, that's scary. The thing was though, they were partly filled with snow, so I can't be absolutely certain that it wasn't somebody there earlier, and maybe somebody normal, but why did they lead to the forest? I then start thinking about how wrecked my sleeping pattern's gonna be when I have to go back to my forest working job. I'm very paranoid and decide that I have to get a weapon now. I just want something to defend myself with. I'm not someone that can really fight, so that's never been an option if I'm in a difficult situation. So, instead, I'm basically just stuck there. Now, when I head back in, I go to open the door, but it doesn't open. Gosh, that's weird. I was certain. Then I realised that I've let it lock on itself. I think, God, I just can't get it right. As I do so, I hear a tapping sound coming from my car. Now, I don't know what it was, but I think this is especially weird. I think, what on earth now? As I rattle around for my keys and go and get the spare one that opens the back of the store. I do this very quickly, then disappear around the side. At least I've got this now. And I hear the alarm deactivate as I go in. Ha, that shouldn't have happened, and I laugh to myself. Now I get in, and I realise too that something else is wrong. There's some footprints going around, just like somebody's come out of the shower. Now I don't know why in my stupid mind I was fixated on how did the alarm get turned off, and I don't realise that there's some movement coming from inside the window. I presumed it was coming from outside, so I decided to go in the back quickly. I then hear a scurrying sound and hear the front open. Now I was actually angry. I get the knife out my pocket and do a little charge, screaming, making all kinds of sounds. No, I'm too late, as I see somebody rush off into the forest. I go back and I can see that they've stolen some food and things. Nothing too important, but I don't want to get in trouble with my boss, so I decide the best thing that I can do is basically just hide the evidence. You didn't have to try hard to do this because it was an old store and nothing was really audited. So all that meant is that you had to move some of the items around, putting different ones behind it, and it looked like nothing had vanished. So I do this and try and calm myself down. Not too later, I hear another sound. My heart drops as I go to see what it is. It's a truck. I feel so relieved to see a normal person. They say, "Hi, I need to get some gas." I say, "Sure, certainly." And I go and get the pump to work for them. They say, "Are you alright?" And I say, "Yeah, fine." Maybe it's because of the caffeine and me being scared prior, but I'm overly eager to help them, and I think they actually found me a little bit weird and were kind of put off. I say, no, I'm just here to help you," as they kind of hesitate for a bit. So now I've become the weirdo in this situation. They then say to me, "Hey, I saw someone walking down the side of the road. I don't know if they needed help or what." I say that's weird, and say, "What were they wearing?" They said they don't know. I don't know how you can't possibly know that if you notice somebody, but they really seem to not have an idea, as they go back into their truck and drive off. Seeing that drive off was literally like watching my last sunset. A wave of emotions were going through my body, and I didn't like any of them. Suddenly, it felt much colder, and the snow seems to pick up almost instantly, or more rather I suddenly notice it and become more aware. Maybe that's the fear setting in, I don't know. I just take a deep breath out, then turn back to go back inside. I tell myself, you gotta calm down, you're gonna scare them off now. I'm basically trying to stop a catalyst effect now, because I find that when I get scared I can panic, and that makes everything worse. So I just keep on working the till and try and act like nothing has happened. So I do this, and what do you know? Another dream. I drift off, but this time I have a strange dream. I'm walking through the forest now. Everything seems so cold and still. Snow is everywhere around me, but not directly where I am currently. The air feels very cold and I notice my breath. As I'm walking through the forest, I see something or someone. Every so often I turn a corner and I'll see them for a literal flash and then they disappear. Also, there's some kind of alarm going off at the same time. It kinda sounds like a warning, but I don't know what it's to, and it's slowly getting louder and louder. I go to look around and I realise that my vision's blurry. It's almost like somebody smudged the top of my eyes, but it stays in place when my eyes don't. Now, as I go on, I feel more and more nervous and I feel like I'm being stalked. Suddenly, everything stops and starts going backwards, and I can feel that I'm being dragged away by something. My vision stops again, then it all goes black. I wake up now very quickly, basically in the midst of a heart attack, my mind not knowing what's real and what's a dream. Calm down, I say to myself. And then I'm in my dream again. I can see two figures up ahead of me. They're wandering around looking at blood on the floor. This is really weird. I can hear alarms now, but they're different. I'm walking around and nobody seems to notice that I'm there. The blood, I just can't get over the blood. It's really weird. It was almost like I was a silent observer to something horrible, but I didn't know to who or what had happened. Now, I go across a bridge which is covered in snow. I don't feel the cold or anything, and I make my way back in. I go into a white room, then everything goes black again and I'm awoken. I hear banging on the door. It's my colleague. I jump up really quickly and I say hey, rush in to let them in. I've come to my senses extremely quickly now. They say, gosh, what happened? You seem really shook up. And I said that, well, I had a bad dream. And I take a while to calm myself down. They say, go home, man, you look like you really need some rest. And then I say, well, the night shifts get to me, and I don't really mention too much else. I do say that I thought I saw something paranormal, and he says, alright man, you're probably dreaming. He really doesn't listen to me, but I then explain that I'm pretty sure that I've seen that guy that the girls are all scared of. I then explain roughly what they were wearing and the direction that they went in, and my colleague seems absolutely in a state of dismay. God, I thought it was all a lie, and now you're telling me this? And swore. I say, yeah, just be careful, bro, honestly, it's really weird. Then I get into my car and start up the engine. I took a while just to calm myself down and think, you know what, I probably just need a good rest and this is all nothing. The problem is too, I'm only about 1 day away from having to start my other job. Now I didn't like driving at night, especially not when I was tired, but I almost went into a trance or something and kind of just gotten on with it. I remember driving through the snowy hills as I'm on my way home, and I can't stop thinking about my experiences that night. I think maybe I was just really sleepy and I merged dreams with reality, but it didn't feel like it. There was something about the emotions which I was feeling during the times that I was definitely awake, of which were too powerful and sobering. I'm never somebody to confuse dreams with reality too, so I knew the chances of this being the case were very remote at their very best. Still, there was definitely something odd. I realised too that I wasn't driving very safe either, because I was constantly looking on either side of the road trying to see if there was anybody walking past. I was convinced that I was going to run into the ghost of the person in the car crash. I was maybe going to end up as that ghost too, I thought, and I start to slow down a little bit. I was actually gripping the steering wheel so hard on the drive home that all of my knuckles have gone white, and I really struggled to move my fingers. I get in and basically collapse, and I probably had the best night of my sleep ever that day. I think my body just decided to go into some kind of coma state to recover. I remembered when I woke up though, I felt ever so drained and just kind of weird. Maybe my brain was fried from what had happened, but it was a nice day and the sun was actually shining. I took a look around and I can see some snow falling too. It's the only time that I've ever been able to see some of the sun and snow at the same time, which I thought was really bizarre. It wasn't heavy snowfall or anything, but it was weird. I then start to hear an alarm sound again. It kind of sounds like when there's a dangerous gas alarm, or maybe from a radiation counter thing, like the modern ones, but it was really weird. I then step outside and realise that it's one of my neighbour's house alarms. He comes out with his gun saying, "Hey, hey," and for a second aims it at me and I say, "Gosh, what are you doing? It's me. It's me. It's me." And he then lowers his weapon and says, "Sorry, someone just tried to break in. They were heading your way." I say, "What?" He says, "Yeah, I think they were trying to rob you or something. It's really weird." He rushes around and all we can find is footprints. We look at each other and realise that we need to follow these. I go quickly to grab my coat. I've still got my knife in my pocket from before and a flashlight. The sun started to fade away now, and it's a little bit late in the evening, so darkness is upon us. So we head out there, following these tracks, talking about who it could have been. My neighbour was in a bit of state. Simon kept saying, "God, I'm gonna kill them. I'm gonna kill them. I'm gonna kill them. God, I need to kill these." And I tell him to calm down. And why is he so angry? It's just a break-in. It's not the first time one's happened around here, but he said no. I'm telling you, something was off this time. There was something wrong about this, I can sense it. I was actually a little bit worried about him too. I thought, well, I don't really like the fact that I brought a knife to this gunfight, if it comes down to it. But we continue on. Now we're following the footsteps, and this is the first thing that I really can't explain. It seems like they're constantly getting further away, yet they're incredibly fresh. But there's no one there. I mean, what's especially weird is that you would think from how fresh they were, on your horizon you should be able to see someone. But we would see the tracks stop, and as soon as we got a bit further up, it would continue going, and we are basically never getting any closer to them. We keep going deeper and deeper into the woods, and the whole time I'm starting to feel quite uneasy with this all. There was also a mist which picked up at about the same time, which makes the whole thing much more horrible, to be honest. Now, no excuses to be weak or scared. I had quite a lot of energy, to be honest, because I wasn't as tired as before, so I used this to try and motivate myself to be more brave and actually take the lead. We've probably been doing this for almost half an hour when I say, "Come on, Simon, stop. This is what, Brian?" So let's just turn back. This is getting dangerous now, as we realise that we're going further and further into the forest, seemingly having absolutely no gain on this person. We could just see the footprints, which seem pretty large. He says, "Yeah, you're right." Silence actually washes over us for a few seconds as we look at each other. We're both actually quite nervous now, as we realise that we shouldn't have really done this, so we start heading back. I take one last second to look over my shoulder. I have the feeling again, the same one from being on the gas station, but I try and push it aside, and we start walking off ahead. Now my friend's taking the lead, Simon. He's actually walking much quicker than me, and it's the first fear that I've detected in him. To be honest, he has guns, so I don't really know why he's scared. The guy with the little flimsy pocket knife was being the brave one, but hey, I'll take it. On the walk back, it's starting to get dark now, and we realise that this is a really stupid idea. I don't want to be stuck out here. The problem is too, you know what? The next day, I had to do my job in the forest. I was already picking up more and more bad memories from being out here in the cold, and I was worried that it was going to start traumatizing me a little bit. So I decided just to distract myself. Yeah, I've always been good at that. If ever there's something painful or discomforting going on, if I distract myself, I can really take myself out of the moment and not feel too bad. My mind is now desperately searching for the next question, and before I knew it, we were back. He shook my hand and said, "Well, see you, Brian." I say, "Well, bye, Simon," and I go into my house. There's not much for me to do when I get in, so I make myself a TV dinner, watch some TV, and start to relax a little bit. I start to watch the local news channels a little bit, trying to see if there's any weird suspicious activity. I don't know, aliens, anything to explain this, but nothing. Not a break-in. All is normal. It's cool, whatever. I turn off the TV and I go to my bed and start trying to sleep. I have a very comfortable bed and I've actually got a heated under mattress, so this thing is absolutely lovely to fall asleep on. Again, I have a lovely sleep. Honestly, I wish I'd done this every week and had something chaotic kick off, because it's only then that I seem to get some real good shut-eye. So I wake up in the morning and I wake up suspiciously early. I'm always paranoid that I missed my alarm, so I go and check it quickly, but luckily I hadn't. Great. I actually decided to try and leave sooner than normal this time. I want to try and beat any potential traffic, or just anything that could make me late. I'm one who doesn't like tardiness, so I was especially trying to avoid it today. I thought maybe I could burn off some energy from doing that too. So I start driving, and I'm just about to pull into my work, and I see someone by the side of the road sitting. I try and look back, but I've already rounded the corner by then, and I wonder whether it's actually a person or maybe some kind of snowman that somebody's made and decided to throw a jacket on. So I go inside where the small gift shop is. It's not really a gift shop, it's more like a cafe, but they have some handmade things in there. I say hey to the lady that works on the till. She's been there for ages and she said she looked tired. I say thank you sarcastically and go over to my desk. Emails. There's probably about 60 that I have to reply to. They really accumulate, but it's basically just saying what jobs and tasks I need to do. I have a habit of printing them out and bringing them like an itinerary. Trees that have fallen, things that have gone missing, things that I need to repair. I sigh it as I'm going to have to bring some heavy equipment with me as I go out there. Also, I wasn't finishing too late into the night, but I was going to have to be out there while it was a bit dark. They actually did this so we wouldn't have visitors there at the same time as we're repairing things, which I think is really silly. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? Who's not going to come here because they're actually maintaining it? What do they think? Some freaking aliens come down and do all the work, as if by magic, or there's some kind of invisible helpers? I don't know. I sure wish there were though. So I go out. I was the only one working there at the time, and that's something I didn't like too. It meant that I had more work to do, and it also meant that in the previous shift it was the same. They kind of staggered our shift patterns, so it meant that they might not have done everything. I always preferred having someone to speak to too while I was out there. Now I head out and I have to come across a wooden bridge. There's quite a lot of these around. They're pretty cool, but I never trust being on them. I know they're meant to be built well, but I just don't trust them for some reason. So I start making my way across the bridge when I suddenly see that there's some footsteps here. Now the footsteps continue on the path that I'm going on, and that gives me chills. It's literally the only time that I've ever seen footsteps like this before. Visitors rarely actually use this because the main place that looks pretty cool, that's quite far from here. And I'm on a maintenance route now, so why is anybody up here? To be fair, I have seen people here before, and they just use it to pass through basically, and that's fine. But not today, it just felt weird. So I go over and start doing some maintenance work on one of the trees that I had to clear up. Someone's really had a go at this thing. They basically tore down lots of branches and stuff, and that annoyed me. I don't know why, it just really got to me that day. I start to get more and more frustrated and start calling out saying, why can't people just respect this place for what it is? Then I realise that it's probably given me a job, so I quickly be quiet. I then hear somebody laugh. It was only for a second, but kind of like a quick ha. It's in a really weird pitch, starting high then ending low, followed by some weird exhalation. I realise nobody's out here, so I think maybe it was some kind of animal. I don't know if anybody knows any kinds of animals that can make laughing sounds, but if you do, let me know in the comments, because I sure hadn't heard of it before. So I continue my work. As I'm doing so, I do realise weird things. Every so often when I put my tools down, something seemingly goes missing or becomes displaced. It's like I'm losing my mind a bit. I could put down maybe a drill or something, then turn back and it's moved 3 feet to the left. I just tell myself, Brian, you're doing okay. It doesn't matter if you lose it. So I calm myself. I then hear what sounds like laughter again. I'm really confused now. I turn very slowly and pivot on my heels. It kind of sounds like a pig laughing, if that makes sense. Kind of like the grunting sound they made. This goes on for a few seconds and I think, well, maybe it's some kind of boar, but we don't get them here. It certainly wasn't a farm pig too, so I can't figure out what it is. It seems like it's only when I'm confused as to where my tools have went that I actually hear this sound. And that again's quite annoying. It's mocking me, but how could it possibly mock me out here? I can then see movement further ahead, and I realise that somebody is on the trail, but they're doing a good job to stay out of sight, it seems. Again, this casts a lot of doubt into my mind. I don't know. This could be anyone. But I quickly finish up what I'm doing, and I'm able to head back to the station. From getting back to the station, I do an count of all my tools and I realise that some are missing. Ah, that's great. Tell me what that means. You guessed it, I'm gonna have to go back out there and face whatever this is alone. I'm not sure if somebody's actively stealing from me though. It seems kind of like a very low probability out here. So I just slowly head out, again with my knife. This time I brought another screwdriver with me so I can try and stab someone. I don't really have much faith in my pocket knife being able to defend me, so I thought the screwdriver's gonna have to make up for it. Now, I eventually do find my screwdriver, but it seems like it has moved, and some of my other tools that I was missing. Again, why on earth have these things moved? I just don't get it. I collect them all and quickly head back in. I get through my emails and I realise there's none more. There's basically nothing left for me to do and I start to relax now. I felt really good. I put the heating on and just grabbed some of my reading things. If you get finished early, you don't really have to do anything. Annoyingly, there's like a clock in and clock out system, so they're basically going to be on the dot regardless, so you can't always go home unless one of your friends signs for you. But none of them were working there today. So I just make myself at home and try and relax to the best of my abilities. Now in these circumstances it is pretty hard, but it doesn't take too long and I quickly forget about what happened to me. All was well, and it comes around to almost 12. Well, to be precise, it was 1:45. I then get up to see if my other colleague has come. He usually arrives early where he does the night watch. He doesn't actually go out or do anything, he just sits there, but he's cool. I don't see him though, which again is odd because usually he's always there early, so I think that's bizarre. I then hear a scream sound. Only for about 2 seconds, but it kind of puts me into a state of paralysis. I basically just froze there watching what's happening, which luckily turned out to be nothing. Okay, that's great. Well, it could just be a fox or animal. We don't get Arctic foxes, but there's similar things out here, and I think maybe it's one of them. Ah, that's it. One was injured, and maybe it thought my tools were food or something. It sounds silly thinking of it now, but at the time I thought that was a great idea. I solved it, and I'm suddenly very merry. And my colleague arrives, I say hey, and we just spoke for a while. I think both of us actually appreciated having the company, so we just sat there talking for about a good hour or so. He's really excited to become a Marine, and we're just talking about that for a while. I then said about my future plans to make some companies. I knew that I was going to have to change jobs because I wasn't going to be able to get the time and resources to do it with what I was currently doing. Also, I felt tired all the time. I noticed more and more that I'd just be more willing to sleep after work, and that wasn't really a good thing, because nothing gets done then, or if you do things, you just feel like all of your time's gone on to working, which also isn't nice. So I don't know. I felt a little bit down at this point, but as always, I can be resilient, so yeah, that's what I do. But anyway, after explaining this to him, he says thank you, and we say our goodbyes. I think he needed kind of the pep talk and needed to learn about resilience, so he really appreciated it. So I get into my car and start driving back. Now my car feels cold and doesn't respond well. It's a car that doesn't always do too well in the snow, but that was fine. I was going to drive more slowly now. I hated to drive in the snow. I loved how peaceful and quiet it was in the roads, but the cars didn't always have ABS or whatever you call it, so the tyres could basically lock up while you were driving. This actually happens to me a few times, and I have to kind of tap on the brakes. It's a weird technique I picked up. Actually, when I changed cars, I still adopted this, and I stupidly put myself in danger because of it. Now I make it back home, and I realise there's footprints everywhere. They're all around my house, and even my neighbour's one. So again, I think maybe somebody's trying to get in. I quickly rush inside, have my knife ready, but I can't see anybody or anything. I quickly go over to Simon and ask him if he's seen anything, but Simon hasn't. He seems like he's just woken up and says, "Nah man, I don't think there's anything." He comes to me in his briefs, and that's a memory that I'm never going to forget anyway. So he goes back to sleep. Don't know why he wasn't embarrassed by it, or I didn't put clothes on to get to the door, but I guess I'll never know. So I settle in, get into my routine, and my mum calls. My mum was always worried about me and did a really good job of checking up. My parents actually split up, and I didn't have much contact with my father, so it was always nice when I got a call of her. So we talked for quite a while. Then eventually, I say I have to go to sleep for my shift, and we say our good nights, and I settle in. So I wake up the next day, and everything's normal. The snow this time is much more heavier though. I was actually really hoping that I was going to get a call off of the guys to say that I haven't got to bother coming in, but unfortunately it didn't happen. I mean, it literally never happened while I was there, but I heard stories of it happening before. It's not like school, unfortunately, but maybe it will change one day. So I get in my car, and again, I'm driving as cautious as I possibly can, because I know how easily that my car goes off the road if I'm not careful. And that starts happening. I get really close to going off the road and kind of end up in a ditch, and I think, great. The funny thing was, I was only about 30 meters from my actual job and workplace, but my car decided to give out then. I tried quite a few times to get it out, and decided just to wait for a while. I realised then that I can get some boiling water and basically free my car if I can do the walk, so I do that. I say hey to my buddy, and he says that he's going to help me out. He's kind of like one of those Labrador dogs. the golden retrievers, the wonder dog which wants to be your best friend and always help you. So I was very happy with this. We threw some boiling water down, and luckily it frees up my car. I couldn't believe how well it worked actually. So that's something that I've always remembered since. So what do? We get into my car and I drive him back. I then make a joke about charging him for the trip, but it goes over his head somehow. I really don't know how. I then start explaining the joke and just give up on him trying to understand it and say no, don't worry about it. He says, oh yeah, huh, and finally gets it. I look at him like he's really weird. Now, I get in there and I check the emails. He says, you're not gonna like this. I say, what's that? He says, well, I'm pretty sure last night that I heard someone out there. I definitely saw them. Someone was lurking around and I thought they were in trouble, you know. I went out there and tried to hunt them down, seeing if they needed anything. But it's like they would just run from me. I say, what do you mean? They say, I don't know if there's forest people out there or what, but they wouldn't come near me, in the southern accent that he had. He actually grew up on a ranch somewhere, and he said that he had a good idea and good feel with people, and that person just didn't feel right. I think, well, at least I'm in the daytime now. I don't really care, to be honest. If this happened in the nighttime, I'd be like, yeah, sure, let's call the cops and everything. Now, I'm a little bit annoyed to say this, but I really didn't care. I just thought, well, it's the daytime. I'm not that small of a guy. Maybe I could handle myself. Who knows? Not like I could fight, but I should be alright. And I trusted myself to be able to run off. Yes, a great instinct. A warrior's will. But yeah. He then says that he's actually going to stick around for me, which I really appreciated. It was kind of like returning the favour of me helping out the other night and having those conversations with him. He starts talking about the ranch where he's from and saying how much he loved it. I asked him why he liked it so much, and he said he kind of felt like a real life cowboy. He would do the cattle handling and things like that and working to tame the horses, and I thought that was really cool. He even said they had donkeys out there, and I started to clown him for it. He then mentions to me that he's going to head over to a 7-Eleven or Walmart, and if I wanted anything. I say no, that's fine, don't worry. I did really appreciate it though. He was literally offering to drive away from work and then come back to give me supplies. I didn't have any other friends that good there, so I thought that was really cool. I then checked the emails and I have to go and repair something. It's a part of the bridge. I wasn't sure, but it seemed to be the same one where I thought I'd saw the footprints or the person walking, so I was already a little bit hesitant to be out there. I then step out and just make my way there. Now, because of the clouds and the heavy snowfall, it actually looks kind of dark. You could actually see quite well though, because maybe it was a reflection off of the white of the snow. You seem to have pretty cool visibility, which I was happy about. So I make my way up, and I'm not too far away from the bridge. I start doing my repairing work when I notice something. I feel kind of heavy suddenly, almost lightheaded, like I'm gonna vomit. I don't know why that is. I knew it was very cold though, and I suddenly feel a bit wet, which I think is really bizarre. Then, something comes over my mouth and I hear a whisper in my ear. I know where you live. I was certain it was my colleague playing games on me, and I kind of ignored it. My head then suddenly comes back. I kind of fall a bit as I realise that somebody's pushed me. I go to get up to see what's happening, and I notice somebody running off into the forest. I get up to go after them, but I feel weird. I feel like I have absolutely no energy whatsoever to chase after them, though I am actually able to chase them for a little bit. I go to call out, but I feel like I can't do that either, and suddenly my legs go weak, and everything starts to slowly go black now. and I'm seeing little stars and feel extremely weak, almost like I've just collapsed into myself. I'm there for a little while, in this weird void, when I'm awoken again. There's bright lights and medics. I'm in an ambulance. I slowly fade in and out of consciousness, and then I wake up again in a hospital bed. I was so confused as to where I was and in so much pain. I tried to move and somebody quickly tells me not to and pushes me down. I ended up going to sleep and eventually wake up again, coming round. Then I quickly find a nurse rushing over to me, trying to help me, giving me some water. I say what happened. She said, "You had surgery. You got attacked." I then look at her, really confused. I don't know whether this is a real situation or just a figure of my imagination, but hearing the beeping sound of monitors around me and realizing there's other patients here suddenly sobers me up. I say, "But what happened?" She says, "Someone stabbed you while you were at work. That friend of yours called the police for you and come looking out. Couldn't figure out where you'd gone. You had to have surgery. You almost bled out." I then ask her, "Did I punch back? What happened?" She says, "I don't know. You're gonna have to wait for the cops to arrive. Your friend's gonna visit soon." That's all she says that she's able to tell me. She doesn't know much else, so I'm stuck there, absolutely in another planet. I can't believe what I'm hearing. It almost didn't feel real just coming from her, so I waited. I waited and waited for what felt like forever. Then eventually, my buddy shows up with some flowers and chocolates and some candies I loved. He comes over and hugs me and says, "Man, I didn't think you were gonna make it," with tears in his eyes. I say, "But what happened?" He said, "Well, I come back from the store and couldn't find you. I knew something was off, and I don't know, I just felt it in my soul. I went out there, and I could see that you'd went over to the bridge, and that's where I saw the weirdo, so I headed out there. I had my rifle and everything ready. I eventually found a pool of blood and a trail of blood, and you collapsed on the floor. I dragged you back into the station and called the police. They're out there searching for whoever done this to you. You got stabbed pretty bad, man. I didn't think you were gonna make it," as he starts crying again. I just hug him and I'm so grateful. I'd never been so grateful for the air that I breathed, to be able to see things and hear, and just everything, but I was in so much pain. Now the road from there was a long recovery. It took me forever, and I actually still have scar tissue there which can really hurt me to this day. I'm not quite sure whether they actually found him or not. I basically immediately moved to a different country where my parents lived and was able to sell my house. I was able to more than thank my friend for it, but it's a horrible experience. I don't know if any of what happened to me was linked with my other job, working there in the store, but I think it might have been. Okay, so it's been a while, but I've decided it's finally time for me to share my experience with everyone. I currently work as a forest service worker. I've done this for not too many years, and something jogged my memory recently. This is something that happened when I was much younger, and is something that I've not really been able to forget. It was I and a group of friends who decided to explore a cabin which had been long abandoned in a forested area close to where we all lived. We were all excited to go there. There were rumours that there was more than meets the eye there. We basically were convinced that it was haunted and that we're going to find all kinds of ghosts and things there. You know, just typical things to get teenage boys excited about exploring, so we head out. As we head out, it had been raining recently, and our parents told us not to get dirty. I actually had a big umbrella, so I was pretty happy. I knew too that I could probably utilise this as some kind of weapon if I really needed. So we're heading out into the forest, and it has a really cool vibe to it. We're pretty sure where this thing is, and we're excited to go. There were the odd leaves falling down, and it wasn't too far away from Halloween, so we were definitely ready to be spooked out. It's funny saying that in hindsight. So we start walking when suddenly a man appears on the path up ahead. He looks pretty weird with a long white beard. He's saying things but kind of stopping every few seconds. Nobody understands what he wants, but he looks really weird. He suddenly locks eyes with me and for some reason just won't stop staring at me. I find this especially weird, and I felt like I was almost caught in a trance while making eye contact with this weirdo. I tell him to leave me alone. Eventually though, he walks off into the stream, literally into the water going uphill. I don't know how he was able to do so, but he literally just takes off, and that was the last we ever saw of him. We look at each other and decide to start jogging a bit. The thing is, we don't know who this person is or why he's out here, but he's definitely weird. Maybe it's some kind of guy that likes to live off the land or something, who knows. But we left him to go his separate way to us. I felt pretty good at the time. I felt like this is it. This is what we wanted. Everything's coming together suddenly, and this is the moment that we've been waiting for. We start to make up some things and imagine that he's probably come from the cabin that we're heading to. We eventually see the cabin, and that thing looks scary. It was almost like it had just been planted in the middle of nowhere. This is long before we had mobile phones or any good way to communicate with our parents, so you really felt the desolation of the area. Especially because, well, we lived in a pretty remote area to begin with, but if you go into the forest, there's all kinds of crazy things out here. We had regular sightings of Bigfoots and UFOs, you know, all the good stuff. But this thing felt different. We bravely start making our way towards the cabin. Apparently there's another group of friends who one of the people I'm with knows, and said allegedly if you go there on your own at night, crazy things will happen to you. The ghosts will try and kill you. As he said that, my friend made me jump and it annoyed me. But we pressed forward and eventually get to the cabin. There was no door to worry about. We ended up heading in, and I can see a way down to a cellar. Now this is interesting. This wasn't on the script. We knew there was more to this place, but none of us expected to find something like that so early. So that was definitely an interesting moment for us. We have a look around, and there doesn't seem to be anybody else present. That's when we realise it. We call him Steve. Crazy Steve has appeared again. He seems to have a pan on his head too, which was really weird. We think, God, does he live here? Is he cooking? But he can't be, the place is abandoned. He's just watching from behind a rock, saying all kinds of gibberish, but clearly in our direction. You know the homeless guy who ends up in the freezer on The Simpsons? Well, it kind of looked like him. He's wearing actually similar clothes, which is quite funny thinking of it now. He doesn't seem to be getting any closer though, so we decide to investigate a bit more. I know this probably isn't smart or wise to turn your back on an absolute weirdo living out there, but he seems to be relatively harmless. I can't stop thinking about that basement though. What could be in there? It was definitely odd. So we wait in here for a little while, and we realise that Steve's got a bit closer now. He's moved even further along to a rock. He always seems to hide behind these big rocks or trees, like he knows what he's doing to not be seen by us. Yeah, I'm getting more and more freaked out now, and we decide that we should probably go back. Now we've decided to start picking up the pace a little bit. We've started running now to try and get away from him. At first he doesn't do anything. Then a loud thud happens and I'm forced to look behind myself. There he is, throwing something towards us. It's a pan. We can hear more gibberish in a very loud and dark tone, and we can hear pat pat pat. He's chasing after us. My God, was he quick. One of my friends screams out, how can this old guy be so quick? Honestly, it was almost inhuman the pace that he set. He was gaining on us, and all of us were pretty healthy and should have had much more pace on him, but we don't seem to in that moment, and it's really frustrating. We start running as fast as we possibly can, desperate to get away from this weirdo. Eventually we make it out of the forest and we seem to have lost him. What the heck was that? We all say, as we're all entirely dumbfounded as to who that was and why he was chasing us. We eventually get back home safely and not too much else happens, but something was stuck in my mind. I just couldn't forget about that guy in that cabin. I don't know why. And that led me to a few years later, when I was in the area on my own. When I got a bit older, I got into the habit of going for night walks in that place. I'd long forgotten about that guy for the meantime, and I felt pretty safe out there. I was going for one of my night jogs actually on this specific occasion, one where I was my typical indecisive self, and I couldn't decide whether to jog or walk, so I did both periodically. And would you know, there's a cabin up ahead. It looks so nice, so inviting and enticing, and there's the thunder. A storm was brewing. It just felt too perfect and excellent to be out there. I suddenly got buckets of energy from who knows where, and I decided that it's my time to investigate alone. I wanted to know what was in that basement. Nobody had told me this stuff before, and the adrenaline and excitement was taking over for me. I take a moment to look around and I think, Steve, I hope you're not here now. As I go in, and I say sorry, almost as though I was acknowledging in my head that what I was about to do wasn't smart, but I was going to do it anyway. So off I go, towards the cabin. Every footstep I take, I can feel my heart beating quicker and quicker as I get closer and closer to this cabin. And what do you know? The next moment I'm in there. Yes, it's just like I remember. It's almost like every room that I look into is another part of nostalgia for me as I feel more and more excited seeing it. You know what, I'm going to come back here with all my buddies. We've got to do this again and explore. And then I see it. The path with stairs, and I can't help but go into it. So I do so, and I go up initially, then I go down, deeper and deeper. This place is huge. Something falls next to me and I can hear almost an echo, a reverberation. Wow, this is cool. I then realise that it goes on quite far, and I want to see how far this thing actually goes. So off I go. There's quite a large concrete wall to my left, then a small tunnel which goes off to the right next to it. I actually have a flashlight with me, so I flick it on for a second. I tied it onto my sweatband that I'm wearing, and I've got pretty good visibility. I had to put my sweatband the wrong way, kind of having it vertically on my head, but it does the job perfectly. I was almost like a surgeon or mechanic now, operating with true precision. So I start making my way along when suddenly I see a drop up ahead of me. I slowly feel around the sides of it, and it doesn't seem too large. I can see the bottom for a second with my flashlight, and would you know, the thing falls off. It knocks itself out along with the battery at the same time, and I can't find it, so I go to turn back, and then I feel warmth up my arm, and suddenly a pulse. It's my pulse. I'm grabbed and almost fall headfirst into the tunnel, but I stop myself and scream. Something is gripping onto me. I reach down and feel a hand, a human arm. I cannot seem to loosen this thing's grip until I smash it as hard as I can. I actually miss and really hurt my hand hitting the side at first, but I'm able to get free. I don't hear anything after that, and I scurry back screaming. I'm screaming every few seconds while I catch my breath and eventually make my way back up the stairs again. I start running, and I can't really see clear. I realise now that lots of dust and things has kicked into my eyes, and I say, how can this happen? It can't get worse for me. I can't see where I'm going, but luckily, I know the area well, as I run through some of the forestry. It seems like the forest is closing in on me as I get closer and closer to escaping. I kept up a beautiful pace and eventually make it to the border of the woods. I start screaming over and over again, not knowing what on earth happened to me. Was it Steve? Did he finally come back to get me? I don't know. I eventually make it home quickly and I tell my parents about what's happened, and my dad insists on calling the cops or going back there himself, but my mum says no, just leave it, it's probably just some weird homeless person out there. I then vowed to myself and my parents that I'm never going to go back there again, and you know what? I didn't. I never found out why that happened or who it was. I don't know what made me think of it again so much recently, but I just want the answers, but at the same time I don't. Now back in around March of this year, I went camping with a friend, my boyfriend and 3 dogs. My friend slept in his tent with his dog and I slept in my tent with the 2 dogs and my boyfriend. My friend's tent was about 30 feet away from ours, and we were camping in northern GA in the mountains off an old Forest Service road. We're right next to a creek. For context, I'm an experienced backpacker and am familiar with the unusual nighttime sounds like the rustling of leaves, sticks breaking and other things like that. I've had a lot of experiences by myself camping, so it's rare that I get spooked out by anything other than humans nearby, as I'm aware of the dangers of travelling solo as a female. However, this particular night, I wake up in the middle of the night with a sense of absolute dread that I've never felt before. I check my phone and it's about 3 AM to 3:40. Now, I really had to use the bathroom, and I am really debating on whether I wanted to put on my hiking boots and venture out, or just wait until the daylight. I didn't want to wake up my dogs in particular because they'll get excited by the sounds of me putting on the boots and stuff, and they'd want to go out too. So I'm in my tent, and that's when I noticed it. It's almost like a hum, but not in the pleasant way where it's a tune or anything like that. It's a low-pitched hum that is reverberating throughout the camp and forest, and through my body. It has 2 tones. It starts with a relatively higher pitch one, and it would switch alternatively to lower pitches after a period of time. Then it would start over without a break or any kinds of sounds at all. It wasn't soft either. It felt like it was covering the entire wooded area that we're in. It didn't sound like an animal, a person, a machine, or anything like that I've ever heard before. At this point, I absolutely can hold off from the bathroom, but I'm struggling so much that I have to put my boots on and quietly tell the dogs to stay put. My boyfriend's still sleeping, and zip my tent and go outside. And the entire campsite was covered in this spooky fog, but it felt like it was more my vision than that, not the actual air. I can't see. The 2-tone humming actually got louder. I do my business maybe 5 feet from my tent, and I quickly note back into it and bury myself in the sleeping bag with a sweatshirt over my head, trying to drown out and ignore the humming. The dogs actually raise their heads and growl a few times throughout the experience, but it wasn't unusual for that to happen when camping. I never saw any figures or lights in the woods, but I also was not looking for them and was trying to ignore the entire experience. I don't know what the humming could have possibly been. This happened many years ago when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I wouldn't describe the area I was in as necessarily backwoods, but it was a wooded area with a 100+ acre ranch. The land is in the southwest part of the United States. My family owns a property and we have family reunions every year and all stay there for about 5 days to camp. There's an area of the ranch where we all set up camp and cook and eat. Getting to that part of the ranch actually requires driving through a small village and several gates for about 2 miles. The first gate beyond the village is slightly past a set of railroad tracks. Now, the story goes on a bit, but I've been camping at the ranch for as long as I could remember, and the land was private. My parents would allow me to go off on my own during the day, as long as I didn't go far. I'd spend time walking the property near our camp looking for arrowheads and trying to catch tadpoles in the ponds. On this day, I left the large camp area for lunch, which was around 11:30. I told my mum I was going to a nearby creek. I planned on catching some tadpoles and bringing them back to camp, back in time for a swimming trip my cousins were planning. They wanted to go to a nearby river and I really didn't want to miss it. I made it down to the creek and got several tadpoles. I probably spent a total of 15 minutes down there. To get back to camp, I would have needed to either climb up a relatively steep embankment with a lot of loose rock, or circle around on a longer route with a flat trail. I'd usually go up the embankment, but I actually didn't have a top for the bottle of water where I'd catch the tadpoles, and I didn't really want to risk slipping and spilling them out or killing them. I had never walked the longer trail by myself, but I had with my dad and felt confident that I could make my way back to the camp. As I walked back to the camp, I had my head down looking for arrowheads in the washed out areas of the trails. I started feeling a little creeped out as I continued walking. We all know the feeling like somebody's watching us. It's really unsettling, but I chalked it up to getting spooked out on the trail by myself. Now for the next part, I can't explain it whatsoever. It's as if a light switch was turned on or somebody snapped their fingers and I come back to reality. Except when I came to, I wasn't on the trail I'd been on before. I was near the railroad tracks and it's completely dark. My mum was standing in front of me shaking my shoulders and yelling, "Where are you?" Now there's two things that I clearly remembered about those moments. That I came to and the look of anger, relief and fear in my mum's eyes as she's yelling at me, and in the confusion as to what was going on, the last thing I remembered was walking on the trail back to camp, and now suddenly it was dark and I was at the railroad's tracks leading to the ranch, which is over 2 miles away. The best way I can describe it is to compare it to the movie The Butterfly Effect. The main character would be living in one moment, then suddenly he'd wake up somewhere different. My parents drove me back to camp and I learned it was 10:30 p.m. This meant that I'd been gone for 11 hours, about 10 and a half of which I can't account for to this day. My parents and all my family had understandably feared really that I wasn't going to return. They've been looking for me all day. I was really a good kid when I was growing up and I'd never stay out past my set times or anything like that, so this was certainly something out of character for me. Now my parents were baffled. I tried to explain that I have no memory of it, but they didn't believe me. They thought I got lost and maybe was embarrassed to admit it. This is the only time that I've ever experienced anything similar to this. I can't explain how unsettling it is to not be able to account for hours on end. Was it coincidence that it had happened, or was it something else? How have I lost almost 11 hours of my life like this, having no clue as to where they went? Now it's the early March of 2021. I was just barely recovering from a significant concussion, enough to where I could actually drive again. I still couldn't work for another few weeks and couldn't look at screens or even read, so there was plenty of time for me just to go on short walks and stuff to pass the time in a way that wouldn't aggravate my head. I went to the small trailhead that I haven't been to before. If it wasn't for the trees, I think the houses about half a mile away would have been relatively visible, but I had a weird feeling that I shouldn't go alone. But as always, I was armed with my CCW and figured that I was just being goofy and maybe dreary or something. Now, I approached the trailhead with a strange feeling. I felt like I shouldn't be there. I saw a single car in the parking lot and figured that maybe since a previous car of mine had been broken into at trailhead a few years before, it might happen again. Now, I backed in and hung out for a few minutes. I see 2 dudes with fishing poles coming from the left where I can't see clearly, but there must be a rushing river. They got in the car and left, and I shouldn't be here feelings start to go away. Being an idiot, I still figured that I should go up the trail. I had no idea how long it was or where it went, but I really didn't intend on going the full way unless it is short. I just wanted to go for a walk outdoors. The trees hadn't gotten their leaves back and it was dreary, as I mentioned earlier, but that usually doesn't put me on edge. As I walked, the strong feeling to turn back gets more and more obvious. I felt myself glancing over constantly. It wasn't fun anymore to be up there. It's only been a couple of minutes too. I mean, the feeling of dread was so immediately strong that I still can see my car, and I finally decide that it's time to go back because of how strong the feeling is. I turned around, hand on my pistol in its holster, and stop and listen. After a few seconds, I hear big footsteps to my right. It was a big snap of a branch that had been on the ground already, maybe 25 to 30 yards away. I'm not sure if this matters, but the branch was already on the ground, so it wasn't dead for. I've been working in audio for way too long, and I can tell you what the sound was. Now, it's important to mention that, and I can't really tell exactly what the sound is, but it sounds like somebody's accidentally stepped on a branch. So I wait a second or two after the big snap. I look over to the place it's come from, able to see what felt like a decent amount because of the lack of leaves on the trees, but nothing looks alive. Not wanting to put a trigger, I'm quite fearful of triggering a pursuit instinct in whatever it is. I start walking down the trail, having my sidearm in hand drawn at that point. My car wasn't far, and I'm a naturally fast walker, so it seems to be the best approach. I get back to my car in a minute or two, and heard nothing at all besides a nearby river rustling by. Having backed into my spot, I started my car and put it in drive, but had my foot on the brakes. I wanted to see if anything came into sight and then peel out if I need. Nothing ever showed itself, not that I can see anyway. As I left the area, the feeling immediately went away, but I feel shaken up. I don't know what it was, and I don't want to make any claims as I mentioned, but it might have been a mountain lion probably, as this occurred near the Box Elder area of Utah, and they're often seen even coming down into cities. So, one still in the mountains, but only half a mile away from fancy houses isn't too strange. Now also, whatever it was, clearly knew it revealed itself when it stepped on the branch, and was smart enough to recognize that I immediately looked in its direction as a result. The fact that something saw me notice its mistake, and that I still saw absolutely nothing in turn makes you think that it was a mountain lion or somebody camouflaged. Also, the sense of dread before I even got to the trailhead, I've only felt this a few times, but even if I do, then I'm usually right about something. I live in Australia, and we don't have much woodlands here besides a few that span on for a couple of 100 acres or so. Nothing like what Americans have. And when I was younger, I'd get lost in these woods a lot, and sometimes even sleep in them for a couple of days at most, surviving off fish and creek water. I never had any creepy encounters besides this one time. I was about 10 years old, and just like I do at least once every 2 or 3 years, I gotten lost in the woods again. I was completely fine during this day, as I'd eaten an hour prior to realizing that I have no idea as to where I was going, and the old here we go again moment took over, and I decided to walk around and find some sticks to make a little fire. I knew a lot about outdoor survival, as my family would often go camping a lot, and I watched lots of videos about it, as it interested me and I loved the woods. So I set up the fire as it starts to become dark, and was about to put out my fire before I saw a small deer on the tree line, just nearly out of range of my firelight. It was just staring at me, which gave me some chills, but I just went, "Oh, that's a deer," and waved to it. The deer then scurried off into the woods and I can't hear it anymore. But I suddenly hear this weird sound, like twigs snapping all of a sudden from a much larger deer or something. It then comes out from the bushes, revealing itself. At this point I realised something's up, so I stood up and stared as this deer started staring back at me, which is much bigger. I mentally prepared for the idea of this thing charging me. The deer started walking a bit towards me, and I backed up a little and crouched down, but as the deer kept getting closer and closer, I kept backing up and looking down, and realising this guy had his hoofs directly in towards where the fire is and wasn't reacting whatsoever. This creeped me out. I mean, his fur was burning, and it was starting to burn some of its skin, and it just wasn't reacting. Immediately, I set off bolting, but this thing heard me and kept on. Not really running fast enough to keep up with my legs though. I eventually come up to a small hill and jump down into a bush trying to hide from it, and that's when it happened. The scariest thing of my life, which I remember so well. The silhouette of the deer against the moonlight appeared as, I stated, the deer let out this blood-curdling scream that I've never heard before, and all of a sudden, the silhouette started caving in on itself. I could hear bones snapping and flesh ripping, and the thing gets smaller and smaller, but then suddenly seems to get even bigger, and I close my eyes. When I open them, I see the silhouette of a man where he was. I say hi, hi, and repeat this for about 10 minutes, and there's just silence. He's now stood a few meters away, but the man just walks off into the trees, and I hear the awful snapping sounds again. That was the last I ever seen of that thing. I'm 21 now, and the incident was 10 to 11 years ago, and I still remember the silhouette and the noises of the bones snapping like it happened yesterday. I'm a park ranger, and I'd like to share my story with you all today. More in the sense that I want to get some opinions on exactly what happened to me. I mean, I have my own view, but I guess in my line of duty I probably think differently about threats and dangers, so I really want the outside perspective. I haven't really spoke to too many of my friends about these things because, well, even where I work, I guess like rumours spread really easily and things. I mean, it wasn't the other day that I told people at my job that I was going to be leaving soon, and obviously I didn't give them permission to tell everybody else, but what happened? When I go back, I get complete random people that I barely even speak to saying, oh, you're leaving soon? Yeah, I don't know, it's something that's always annoyed me. I just really don't like it or appreciate it. I feel like it's a big breach of trust, and with something like this happening to me, I don't want that to be the case, but like I said, I want to hear what people think about my experience in my own words, not from the words of others who have potentially misconstrued of what happened, and the truth is what's important here. So, as I said, I'm a park ranger, but I'm going to be leaving the job soon. Now, it's not in the sense that I don't enjoy it like I used to, I just kind of need to evolve as a person, and I think being out there on my own was good for a while, but not for too long. I'm kind of like a social butterfly in the sense that I really need to be around other people, and as much as I enjoy being out there, it kind of becomes the same picture each day, and regardless of how relaxed I feel, I really feel like I need more. And I'm probably too young to have this kind of job in some regards, but not in others. So, I was stationed somewhere that we have a beautiful lake. Now, this lake is absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the most blue ones that you'll ever see. I can't remember exactly why it was so blue, but it was a really beautiful thing. Now, on the day in particular that this event happened, everything was going like normal. I was doing a number of my duties, and, well, in my country, one of those duties is to pick up rubbish that people leave behind and litter and things, however you guys say it. I didn't really have an issue with this, it just annoyed me because sometimes in the sun it would make bags melt a bit, and I guess you can imagine how bad that actually smelled. It wasn't a nice thing. But again, someone had to do it, and often it was us. Now, I started picking up some litter which is on the trail, and this actually annoyed me. I think, why on earth do people want to trash this place? I mean, literally, that's all they're doing. But I have my little grabber thing, and I'm putting everything inside the bag. So to be honest, I'm actually enjoying the time more than I expected to at this point. The trees are given a really nice shade now, so there was no need for me to rush trying to get out of the sun. I have a camel pack, so I'm just constantly drinking from this on my journey. Now the bag gets pretty full, but I kind of had like a holster thing I could hook it onto, so it would kind of hang off the side of me if I use that stick, if that makes sense. But it wasn't too heavy, it was manageable really. Now while I'm doing this, I do notice something strange. There seems to be some kind of diving suit. Well, at least that's how it appears to me. It's probably like, I don't know if you've seen one of the Batmans with Penguin, but the old one. You know the cat lady, the thing she wore in that? It was more similar to that, but obviously it had been in the water at some point. Now, I stop for a moment and think to myself, well, we do get some people that go swimming here, but you wouldn't really want to wear this for that job. And I think this is pretty bizarre. Now, I've prod around a little bit, and I'm worried that maybe it's something weird that shouldn't be here. I gather my thoughts for a moment and realise that it's probably best if I just continue on my way. I'm going to have to come back for it another time. This is quite annoying really, because I have to go all the way back and get another one of those smelly bags to take this thing. I did try and lift it up originally with my grabber thing, but it was far too heavy and I don't want that dripping on me while I'm walking. It will not be a fun time. But I'm prepared for this and I continue on my trail. I get to a point where I decide that now's a good time to get some food in me and stop for a little bit. I'm eating some of my sandwiches and I've got some peanuts with me when I notice something drifting off in the lake. It's really bizarre. It kind of looks like some kind of boat, but it's definitely not a canoe. It's slightly bigger than that. But it seems to just vanish suddenly. It's almost like it sunk down into the water. And I get a little suspicious of this. Now, bearing in mind that I'm actually seeing this through some trees and I'm not 100% convinced myself that what I'm seeing is actually real or not. I also had my cool shades on, so that probably made it a lot harder. I take them off though, and I still can't see much of anything. I don't really have the best of eyes to be honest, and annoyingly I left my glasses back at our old station office, whatever you call it. So I stand there observing, and I don't see anything initially. I note this is odd, and I think, well, I've got some more trash to pick up, and I continue on my way. Now, one thing I'd like to note is that I didn't see anybody else during this time, which is a pretty bizarre thing because, well, usually you see a couple of people around, but today, it was like one of those western ghost towns of today, where nobody's there but people were once. So, I decided that I should probably get heading back now, but not before I take in a beautiful look at this lake. I think this is really nice here, and I actually take off my boots and take my socks off and put my feet in the water. I found it was a nice way to cool down, and that with the sun on your face is really a nice thing. And as I'm doing so, I hear something in the water. Now again, it sounds like somebody's thrown something, or there's a boat that's just come ashore. I look around, half expecting to see somebody dragging things up, but I can't see anyone or anything. I presume that maybe it's a fish, but I don't think the fish here are that big, and that's not how they would normally act. I decide instead that it's high time just to get back. Now the trash is smelling pretty bad at this point, and I kind of swung it round on itself so that way it wouldn't make that much of a smell when I was walking and would kind of seal on itself. And would you know, it splits open. So now I have to spend a while trying to put things on it again and getting it back to normal and kind of making the bag smaller and the smell stronger. As I'm doing this, I notice some more trash up ahead of me, which is strange because I was sure I cleared the path perfectly. I now know that people probably come past here recently, and I go to pick it up. It looks like some kind of note, but I don't bother actually looking at it and just put it straight in the bag. I continue on my walk now, and eventually I get back, throw that nasty stuff away, and actually have a shower there. I know that's kind of like ironic to some people listening because obviously I still have to go back for the wetsuit thing, but I just don't want to smell bad. And I'm quite germophobic. I think that's how you say it. But I don't know, I just don't like germs at all. And I was starting to smell a bit where the bag had opened on myself. But not to worry. I have my nice shower and I get a big thick bag now. I make some notes of what I'm doing in the day because where I work we have to log everything that we're doing. It's just like a general process, but it's important for security reasons. So I say goodbye to the dirty clothes and step out in the new ones with the new bag and everything ready. Now there was some cloud cover so it is a little bit darker, and it also meant I didn't need my sunglasses and I could in fact wear my normal glasses, which I was happier doing so. Now I'm able to see a lot more clear this time, and it probably would have been a good idea to bring them before, but that's in hindsight. So I start making my way again, and I realise that there's more and more trash. I keep on putting them in the bags again, and I think this is a little odd, and it's also annoyed me because obviously I've probably left the trowel with this stuff and not realised it, so now I'm doubling up on my job. The other issue I have is that there's more important things for me to do later in the day. I actually have to install a sign somewhere later on, and I'm not looking forward to it because that thing's heavy. So I just continue on and eventually make it up to where that wetsuit thing is. Now that's the thing. I say where it is because I can't find it. I can find the silhouette where obviously it was in the water before and left a water print, but there's no wetsuit to be found. I look around everywhere and I really can't seem to find it. I think maybe it's drifted in again, and what do I see? Just floating off on the shoreline. I can see it, probably about a mile away or something, and it's on the other embankment. This is no issue for me though, my friend, because I have to go over there with that sign, so I'm not too bothered. I just think it's odd because it shouldn't have been able to slip down because it was actually on some high ground, but not the kind something could roll off of, so I think this is bizarre, but again, I think maybe I'm having a bad day and I'm going a bit senile, or I don't know. So I just pick up more and more trash, and that's when I notice something odd. It all seems to be paper with things scrawled onto it, and I think, well, someone must have done some weird art project, or it was some young kid that was doing drawings and their parents didn't want to take it home. Okay, but that doesn't explain why it wasn't there earlier. So I quickly retraced my steps and ended up finishing the trash rounds. Ah yes, my favourite part of being a ranger that I missed so much, and what was actually an addition to what I was doing originally, but we'll talk about that another time. Now, I start walking back and I have a strange feeling. It's almost like there was somebody else there with me, but of course there's no one around. It actually isn't uncommon to have this feeling and sense, and I don't know. I'm not going to say that I'm someone that picks up on these things well, but it's just a feeling I'd noticed a few times before in this line of work. You're taught actually to listen to it and not ignore it because it might be a sign of, I don't know, somebody in danger. But I checked the log and there's no such reports, so I know that there's definitely nothing wrong. So I just kind of shake it off and get back. Now I'm a bit more annoyed because I have to bring this heavy signpost, but that's fine. At least I'm actually going to get that thing that I saw earlier. I decide once again not to log it though because I'm going to have a long day at this point. So I start my trek. I have to walk quite a number of miles to get through to the other side of the lake, and as I'm walking I notice something. There's two people in a canoe, but I can't really make out much about them. They're kind of in the shadow side of a cloud, if you know what I mean, so I can't really see any details in particular. But they're not supposed to be here. I know that much for absolute certain, and I wave at them and call out. What was a little creepy is they both stop and seem to stare at me. And it could be my eyes playing tricks on me, but it almost looks like one of them's wearing a kind of plague doctor outfit. It's not exactly the same as like the European ones that we had, but it's not far off, and I think this is really weird. Again, I haven't got the best of eyes, and stupidly I don't have binoculars with me, so I can't get a closer look. But I decide that I should meet them on the other side because I think maybe they're the ones who have the wetsuit, and I have a few questions for them. So I start walking now. Every so often I can make them out for a little bit, but then they dart in between trees. My line of view is blocked is what I'm saying basically, but I'm a persistent being, so I keep going. Now, it doesn't take too long, and eventually I get to roughly where they should be, but they're nowhere to be found. I don't know if you guys have seen Pirates of the Caribbean, but it's almost like when the boat just sunk into the water of that weird guy with the tentacles, but they've just vanished now. I'm not really sure exactly what to make of this, but I can only presume that yes, they have gone to the other side of the embankment. Now, I'm not too much further away now, but I'm getting a bit irritated now because this is the kind of stuff that makes you have a really long day. And guess what? My boss doesn't care. He'll just let me have overtime when I'm working till like 9 or 10 at night, then want me to come in at 8 AM the next day. Yeah, you can imagine why I had to leave this place, but anyway, I digress now. So, I'm not too much further away now, and I'm very perplexed about as to where they could have specifically gone. It really doesn't make sense to me how they've just gone under. I mean, is there some kind of big iceberg which I'm missing and they've gone into it like the Titanic? Maybe, but the water doesn't feel that cold. Now, I was so curious as to where they went, I was half tempted to go for a swim. I mean, it'd be quicker than walking, but obviously I'm not going to do that. So I just make my way over to the embankment, and there it is. The wetsuit. It seems to have come snagged upon some logs and things that have fallen off from trees, so I go over to it. And that's when I suddenly feel fear come across my entire body, and I'm kind of froze, just fixated on it without thinking. It suddenly hits me, this could actually be a body. It doesn't look like the wetsuit I saw before, and I think maybe this is a person who's drowned. And I get some adrenaline, and I very slowly proceed. Something feels a little off about this situation, and it literally looks like a headless thing there. I get a big stick and I decide to poke it. I know that's 100% not what I'm supposed to do in this line of duty, but I don't know. There's nothing else I can actually think of doing that's probably going to work now. And that's when I realise something rather bizarre. Some kind of stuffing comes out, and it's not a body at all. It's almost like a farmland scarecrow, but it kind of looks weirdly put together, almost like the Catwoman suit. No, this is where things are really weird, because this was the thing I saw earlier, but it didn't have anything in it. So that raises a question. Who filled this thing up, and why was it here on this bank? I think that's really weird, so what do I do next? Well, I grab another stick, an even bigger one this time, and kind of drag it ashore. And there's some stuffing falling out, which is kind of like originally a white colour, but it's gone to more of a dark cream, I guess. And I'm able to take it ashore, and I leave it there. I'm staring at this thing, which is almost like the farmland thing I said about, but not quite, and I don't know what to make of it. I finally call out, "Hey, whatever you're doing, you're not supposed to be." And I get a response, at least in my head, telling me to get out of there. Now, I guess some of my survival instincts finally kicked in, and to be honest, they're not always the best at all times. Not again for the work I was doing, but that's another reason I left, but hey. So, I start walking back now, deciding that this is something I should probably tell the guys about, and not necessarily investigate alone. I mean, all we've got between me and the relative safety of our office building thing, well, not a building, but you know what I mean, is the water, and I'm not going to swim. That's when I see what appears to be the two figures I saw earlier, this time on the shoreline. Now I get a much better look at them this time, and this is pretty bizarre what I see. I can see they've stopped to look at me, and one's tall but the other's relatively small. They're dressed exactly the same. They have kind of like a weird half pointy hat on, and kind of not exactly a robe, but some kind of gown on, in a weird black but waxy outfit. It's different from what the mannequin was, but they don't say a word. I call out and do a big Y symbol with my hands trying to get their attention, but this doesn't work. I have a weird feeling about this, and this is another weird thing. They both start walking towards me, literally into the water. They walk until they're about head height until they just stop and seem to vanish underwater. Now, this only took about 10 seconds and I decided I was going to wait them out, and finally they resurfaced again, now both going in different directions. One is going towards our station place and the other is coming more towards me, walking slowly along the shoreline. Now, I'm pretty confused here. I go around to look at that mannequin thing and it's still there, but I decide that it's probably best if I get away from whatever this is. Now, annoyingly, I have to kind of trek through some of the more foresty area to get back. I wait for a little bit just to figure out where they're going, and definitely one's coming towards me, but annoyingly it's kind of blocking off the safe through that I already come along. I decide that I am going to have to go through this much more treacherous area, but that's fine. I've got some pretty good boots for it. Now, for some reason I didn't feel terribly under threat at this point. It's probably because the area was so nice and it was quite a good sunny day, so I didn't feel too bad. The only way I can describe my feeling is like something was just way off and I saw something I wasn't supposed to. Now, again, I don't always react with the best survival instincts, so I didn't have anything to arm myself. I just decided to pick up a stick. Funnily enough, it wasn't even a big one, but I guess I could have launched it at somebody if needed, and maybe they would flinch react and that would give me time to run away, so yes, this is the escape plan. Now, this scarecrow thing goes out of sight for quite a while, and I just stop. I think, well, why am I getting so scared of this? Is this really a threat? Or am I the ranger here, who's in control of the situation? And I relax myself a lot more. Now, I'm stood like this for probably about 20 or so minutes, just really confused as to what to do, and I now realise that I was probably in shock a little bit, but at the time I didn't know that. I just thought I was dealing with the situation accordingly to what I could see around me. And now, as I'm standing there, I can hear something breaking through the trees. I think, God, what now? And I quickly take a step back and I manage to get behind a tree. And I then catch sight of it. I can see one of those things now. It's a smaller one, but where its face should be, it's wearing some kind of skull mask and it has black face paint on. Now, I'm telling you this because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I really couldn't. And what do I do in this situation? I get my stick and throw it as far as I can to try and distract this thing. And then it dances towards it, almost like a dog going after some kind of treat or animal, but literally dancing while doing so. I now have some real fear running through my bones, and I start making my way in the opposite direction. Now, I couldn't hear this thing, it almost just gone silent again, and whatever this is, person or God knows what, didn't seem to be following me, and I let my guard down a bit. I've now come to the conclusion that there's some pretty weird cult people out here, and maybe they're trying to get me, and maybe, just maybe, I've come across some kind of crime scene they don't want me to know about. So, I have to start making my way now, tediously, around the lake, to try and get to relative safety, and my mind slips. I completely forget about the other one. Now, I make it probably about halfway across to the relative safety and where I have a truck, but I hear something up ahead of me again. This time it sounds much more forceful and quick, so I quickly duck down. I laid there for probably a good 5 minutes until I lock eyes with it. It was an animal. I can't remember exactly what animal it was. It was like a big rodent, but it slowly makes this merry way towards the water. And I kind of cursed myself a bit just for being so scared. I say, come on, you have to get a hold of yourself and get a grip now. Now what's especially bizarre is that's when I notice it, what appears to be a body floating in the lake. I now realise that this is that thing I'd moved earlier. It was now floating further across, and I observe it until it comes up on the bank again, and then I see it. That person goes to grab it, but they're assisted by another one, equally as tall as them. I now realise that there's at least 3 people here. They're dressed exactly the same, and they drag this over to the shore and leave it there. Now, I was really glued into the spot for quite a long time. I'd actually stared at this whole event taking place for so long that when I looked away, my eyes took a long while to adjust to not looking at bright things again. And it was almost like, I don't know what you call it, snow blindness, but I was pretty much experiencing a form of this, because I'd been staring at God knows what this was for so long now. And I'll take a deep breath, look around and realise that I'm gonna have to get myself out of here. Now I'd actually gone off the path that I was on earlier, and I'm on a bit of a rough area a little bit, and it's not really good for crossing. I now know that I can take the long route to get back, and that's what I decide to do. I have to crawl across some areas and I'm probably gonna get wet, but that's kind of the least of my issues at this specific point. I can kind of go into one of the streams that actually feeds the larger lake that I've just come from, and I'm kind of doing like a military prone crawl around here. I don't know who these folks are, but for all I know there could be 100 of them out of here, and I'm on my own, so even though I'm not the smallest and I'm a little bit built, I really don't like my chances, and things like this really give me the heebie-jeebies, so yes, it's time to escape. Now, as I'm crawling, I don't hear anything. I still have another stick that I've picked up, and for some reason it made me feel a lot more safe. Maybe it's some kind of primitive thing and that's why cavemen always seem to have sticks, but in this specific moment that's what made me feel better and that's what counts. I wasn't that far away from safety, but I come up to the first kind of wetland area and I really feel a bit cold because of the water. I've also managed to scratch up my elbows and my belly and my knees a bit, and I'm now bleeding. I was a little bit worried about getting infected because it's quite dirty here, and you can imagine there's all kinds of bacteria and insects, and I hate both. I know some of you are probably asking, why did I do this job if I don't like those things, and I can't tell you that. I don't really know myself. But now, I'm not too far away from the relative safety of things that I know. I managed to come up to kind of like a clearing where I can actually see across to the lake. I'm pretty worried now that maybe they've followed me around, but there's no one in sight. Now my own breathing was pretty heavy now, but then I hear another kind of breathing not too far away from me. This sounds like quite a heavy breathing, almost like it's being filtered through something. Not exactly like Fader's one, but maybe 10% similar. Almost like that you're wearing something over your face. Not a scarf, but like a plastic one. And I stop dead. I can hear this breathing, but I can't figure out where it's coming from. I know it can't be far away. It never seems to get closer though, and now I don't have the element of surprise because I cannot gauge it. I try my best to stay still and I feel my legs starting to shake, so I tense up my leg muscles and stop myself from shaking. Now this breathing does not stop whatsoever, and I'm now at a point where I must go forward to try and get to better things, and I decide that I should slowly but carefully crawl my way forwards once again. I decided that I wasn't going to stop crawling no matter what, and that's what I start doing. Now I realise that the breathing sound is slowly getting further away with each crawl that I make forward. I managed to get about 5 minutes further from this point and I can't hear the breathing anymore. I decide it's safe to look up, and that's when I see it. Some dark figure not too far off, but this time on the other side. That's when I can see it. There's burning. I try and figure out exactly where this thing is specifically, and I'm able to approximate it to where I saw that wetsuit thing before, or the farm figure, whatever it is. There's a very thick black smoke coming off of it. I'm quite worried now that there's going to be a forest fire, but it doesn't seem likely because it's close to the shore, but that raises the question. How did that fire start and why is it there? Now, I'm not sure what to do at this point, and I start crawling again. I'm not sure whether there's multiple fires or only one, but I know that I'm not going to stick around to find out. And I eventually crawl up to the point that I'm not too far away from the station now. I start to feel a little bit better, and then I feel it breathing on my neck. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this before, but my god, man, it's like somebody takes your soul. It's almost like your brain accepts, maybe it's some kind of prehistoric man thing, but it accepts that you've been captured and you have a second to make a decision. So, with my stick in hand, almost like it was second nature, I turn around and swing as hard as I can, literally with my eyes closed, and there it is, whack. I feel a sudden pain in my hand, and I realise that I'm bleeding. My hand's now wet. I realise that some of the stick is shattered and splintered into my hand, and that's when I see it. Somebody hits the ground with a large thud, and I can't make out a face, but they're dressed in some really weird kind of occultist outfit. It's like a weird dark robe, and then I get up and run. Now this person was pretty big, probably 6 feet and at least 200 pounds, but I couldn't stop to take in too many details, and before I knew it, I make it back to the station, and I actually take off my shirt to try and stop my hand from bleeding because I was worried I was going to bleed out. I quickly get in and scream on the radio for backup and help. While the radio's still on, I make a call out to the local fire responders and say that there's a fire here. I'm not sure what to do, so I quickly go to the kitchen area and get all of the knives and hide them away. I get the biggest one I can find and I grab that. I lock all of the doors and stay on the radio with my friends, who are also my colleagues here. They can't believe what I'm telling them, and apparently the fire people are going to get there first. I warn them that there's strange individuals out here, and they say they understand. It must have took about another 40 minutes though of waiting in agony before they finally get here. And once they do, I quickly point out to where the fire was. It's now gone out, and they say that they're going to investigate. Eventually a few others who work here also arrive, and some law enforcement too, and they say that they're going to take over the search from here. I give the exact location of what had happened, and one of the policemen who's first aid trained actually helps to get my hand patched up. I'd really hurt my hand, but luckily it wasn't broken or fractured, which is a good thing. Now, I ended up waiting in that station for quite a long time, until eventually the fire people come back first and say there's no signs of fire, just some ashes, where something was burned. They said it was clothing, but they couldn't determine which because of the fire. But there was definitely no immediate threat, and that was a relief. That was my biggest fear. A beautiful place like this should not burn to the ground, and if there's one person that can stop it, I'm gonna make sure it's me. Now, second, the police come back and say that they really can't find anyone, and they ask for an entire report of exactly what had happened. I give them everything, and they kind of doubt what I was saying, constantly saying, "Are you sure this is what happened?" And I say yes, and they start doing some weird things, like asking if I've taken any prescription drugs or anything. I say yes. How do you think this happened to my hand? And they say that they're going to keep some people stationed here and try and investigate until they find out what's happened. Now, eventually I got put to a different area. In fact, it wasn't even to do with the forest, it was actually on the admin side. Eventually I had to leave the job because I just couldn't bear the thought of going back there. Now, we were never able to find out exactly how many people were there or what they were doing or why they were there, and since there's no reports of similar events happening, I can only imagine that it was some kind of cults doing some really weird, ritual or whatever they want to do out there, and maybe they were trying to capture me for some kind of human sacrifice or God knows what. I'm just very happy that I managed to stop at least one of those and give them a taste of their own medicine before they got me. So for my first story, while my great-grandpa was young, he was working for someone who had sheep, and one night, one of the sheep went nuts. So during the night while they were asleep, they heard some noises and woke up to find the sheep having a sad one and walking. They tried to stop it, but it didn't listen. None of the sheep ever didn't respond before, so when the sheep turned around, it didn't really look like a sheep anymore, but something else. The voice was deeper, and it seemed to be walking on two legs. The face is distorted, and it definitely wasn't white anymore. My grandpa said that he was so scared after this he ran, and never worked with that guy again. My second story? Now there's a lot of rumours about people using dark magic and evil things, and a guy my grandpa knew didn't believe these things were real. He kept walking around telling this to the locals at the cafes, and a weird old guy heard him. He was like, "You'll see tonight." So he sent a freaking weird donkey to find him. Apparently, it kept kicking him at night until he begged it to stop, and he said he believed it was some kind of demonic entity. For story 3, now this is a neighbour of my grandpa's, and it happened while they're in their 20s. He was a man who went to church very often, always praying and believing in God, and it was like the devil tricked him every day. There was a boy who kept calling him at night at the stairwell of his home. He asked him to go outside and play, and after a while when he didn't join him, the boy basically turned to a black dog. That happened for a long time until they called the priest and it stopped. For number 4, this happened to one of my uncles. He came back from work at night late. They were working as farmers with clover. Anyway, there used to be a small narrow street that led to the house faster, but nobody went there during the night. It was across a road, and there was a small faucet there too, but everybody avoided it at midnight. Well, my uncle decided to head down there faster, just to get home in case anything attacked him, but apparently he felt something grab him by the neck and pushed him down. He immediately starts saying a prayer, the Lord's Prayer, and the thing left. Possibly a demon. A priest later told him to never use that street, and guess what? The street doesn't exist anymore. There's a deserted house there now. God knows what's hiding in it. Now for the next story. My aunt used to hear a weird banging sound outside of her window after they moved into their new home, like somebody was chopping on wood. They often went outside to see if there was somebody, but nobody was there, and apparently they later learned that soldiers were killed in that place during the Second World War. For number 6, a UFO crashed. So crashing during the 90s summer, there was lots of sightings all around Greece, and one actually crashes in a hill next to my village. For number 7, so my cousin said that their clover field once again had something landing in it, because there was a crop circle or something for like 2 years and nothing ever grew there since. Number 8, we went with my grandpa to buy some cheese from a guy who's known to walk into his farm. I look around the walls and it's full of lashes, like whips that hit horses, but some of them were a bit too much, just like they're really super heavy. I said, "What's that?" It didn't look normal. My grandpa told me to shush and we walk home. So after we get home, he told me that the man calls demons and hits them. He asks them who they are, who they hurt, and hits them. So yeah, that was pretty creepy. Well, that's most of my stories from my village in Greece. I'll share more if I get them. Okay, so where do I start? I was walking up to my local park with two of my friends. It was about 9. There is a path when you first walk to the park that leads to this elementary school that I used to go to. There is a fence on the side of it. It's gated, and on the other side of the path is just a hill leading to the park. Then there is a street light on the path. We were walking past this, and one of my friends said, "What's that?" We looked and kept walking towards what seems to be a dog. It was just frozen there staring at us. I got closer and it ran away, and then I saw its spine, and it was like nothing I've ever seen before. It had short legs, but it was weirdly long. That's not where it gets interesting though. We basically just walked up to the park. We were leaving about 10 minutes later anyway, and we were walking and wondering if we'd be able to see it again. So we stopped and started down the path. It's more like a concrete path. Then me and my one friend saw this stick-like man running down the hill towards the woods. It was going really quick. It hit the feet. It was maybe about 7 feet tall, or maybe a bit shorter, pointy legs and arms. I didn't really get a look at his head. I saw it for a good maybe 4 seconds. It wasn't really black, it was kind of black and grey. I saw it clearly, and it went in view and out of view suddenly. It was just running then. Before it got to the path, it vanished. It was terrifying. I got chills. I explained it, and then my other friend said that he saw the same thing. My other friend didn't though. I don't know why. We were going tonight again at the same time to do the same thing and see if we can get it on video. Hopefully I can capture it this time. So I'm going to get straight to the point. Back in the late 70s, my dad was working in a lumber mill in Indonesia during lumber mill related work moments. Now he said that one day he saw a crowd of people gathering around what appeared to be a makeshift cage made by locals. What really surprised him was what is inside the cage, a big primate standing up walking around, which is about 2 meters tall. He said the primate's colour is original and somewhat similar to an orangutan. What is even weirder is that the primate seems to be upset and crying. So, how did the ape fella end up in here, you might ask? Well, my father asked about this, and apparently a man said that somebody went missing and they went out hunting to find what had happened. During the search, one of them found huge footsteps that is so big it can't be made by man. So from here, they split up into smaller parties and do a search. Apparently the missing guy was found on a tree tied up with what seems to be a nest or something. So they help him, and he told them that he was kidnapped by an upstanding ape. Villagers get curious the next day and formed a search party for the ape. I don't know how, but my dad said somehow they found it and caged it. My dad didn't know what happened to the ape, but some of his colleagues said that apparently they killed it to avoid more kidnappings. The primate creature was female. The villagers speculate that it kidnapped the man for God knows what reasons. Now, I was in 8th grade, living in Bayeux in Louisiana. So, this is a normal morning for me. Around 6:30, I'm usually waiting on my school bus. The sun isn't up by then and it's very dark. My house had a floodlight on the side of it which shines onto our shed, which is behind our home and slightly to the right, so I have a perfect view of it. As well as a floodlit light on the front porch that lit up our yard, there's another light coming down. Well, I was waiting, looking back towards the shed, and I see what looks like 4 or 5 of these tall, maybe 7 feet tall, humanoid shadowy figures walking in a line along my shed. They seemed to phase through the fence, and when I say in a line, it was literally like they're holding hands and following each other, trying not to be seen. I think I'm losing it, until the next morning, I saw the same shadowy humanoid thing, except they're in the front yard walking around the trees very sneakily, towards another area, and I know they could see me because they would peek their heads around the tree before they passed us if they didn't want to be seen. I'm 24 now, and I can remember this like it happened yesterday. I don't know what these could have been, honestly. Now, the following is a series of weird things that happened to me that I truly can't explain. Now, what annoys me most about this is that I've tried to tell people my experience and they kind of just laugh it off. Actually, I told one of my colleagues at work today. I work as a forest server fire patrol person, but when I told them my story, they kind of just laughed at me and said, "Oh yeah, is that really what happened?" And that really annoys me. And this is supposed to be someone that's quite similar and that I'd actually consider a friend there, and also had weird experiences before, so I just don't get it. People are so eager to hear what you say, but then they're so happy and quick to dismiss everything. I just don't get it. But let's dive into my story and hopefully at least a few of you will understand. Now, emotionally, I wasn't really the same after this. I don't know why. I'm not a spiritual person and I don't really believe in religion much, but this kind of made me think about what else is really out there. Where I live, there can be lots of snow all the time, but I love to go on my little adventures, and there was a forest that was supposedly haunted near where I lived. Now, I'd heard quite a few things about this place, and apparently you'll hear screams in the night. You'll see headless people wandering around, and I guess just the works really. Now, I'd actually been here on 2 occasions before. One was when I drove out with one of my friends, but to be honest, it was just the biggest waste of time. I mean, literally nothing happened. We were driving for a long time to get there, and basically nothing happened. We just get bored and come back. So I wasn't expecting too much in the second time that I'd been there. Again, nothing had happened, but in more recent times, I'd moved much closer and thought, why not go? Also, there was quite a nice snowfall, so I thought this was pretty cool. I really like going on adventures at night time like this, especially when the elements are involved. For whatever reason, it kind of makes me feel almost like I'm in a movie, especially if I've got my AirPods with me and I just listen to songs, and it really creates a vibe. I always found it empowering, but yeah. So I set out at night, and I walked towards the forest off of the main path, and it's really dark. The stars are looking absolutely beautiful above me, and luckily there's no cars coming, so I just get off and straight into where the forest starts. There was probably about 30 meters of snow or whatnot before it actually starts. Then you've hit by lots of trees. Now I turn my flashlight on and suddenly I can see really well. I had a really powerful one that was actually adapted for cameras and stuff. I was actually joking with one of my friends, it's like turning on the daytime and there's nothing to be scared of. And I also said that this probably scares away the spirits more than anything. They probably think it's God. I think of these jokes as I can see my breath in front of me from the cold. Now, it's kind of like the snow that's fallen quite quickly to the ground, almost like it's kind of sleep, but it's not. It's still snowing. I notice it as I take my first steps into the forest. I have some pretty skinny trees on either side of me when I see something that looks odd. I can see what appears to be a white silhouette to my left when suddenly it vanishes. I'm a little confused by this, but suddenly I realise that it must be my breath from where I've got my scarf and things. I think it's a little odd and I tell myself just to relax a bit, and I keep walking. The trees are kind of like overarching here and it actually looks really beautiful. I do notice one odd thing. There seems to be footprints that lead off from the main trail, but they kind of look like hoof shapes. I thought maybe some kind of animal went through here, or God knows what. It couldn't have been horse riding because the branches are actually too low. To give you an idea, they're probably about 8 feet above me or dropping down to 5, so you'd have to duck sometimes. Now these aren't nice branches too. They're the kinds that come snagged on each other, and if you make one loose, it's going to kind of whip you in the face. And I didn't want to lose my eyes, but it wasn't too much of an issue really. So when I set off, I didn't really have a direction or place that I wanted to go to. I heard there was an old church that used to be here, and I thought, you know what, that would be pretty cool if I can find that. Who knows what would happen if I go there on my own. Now at the time, I was certain no other people around because I literally can't hear anything or see anyone. A really good telling sign is the fact that there's no lights. You kind of need lights to see where you're going out here, but I literally couldn't see any. Every so often, I look off into the woods and I don't see anything. I did notice one or two strange sounds, but they didn't happen too frequently. I know that there's lots of animals out here because of my normal line of work, and just I guess from having some good sense about my surroundings, so I didn't let it put me off. I knew I had to be careful of certain animals out here because I guess some could hunt at night, but I was going to be far bigger and they wouldn't dare go to me. The sky almost looks like a beautiful orangey colour above me because of my torch, and I think that's really pretty. I do start to feel the cold a bit now, so decide to pick up the pace. Another interesting thing is there's lots and lots of footprints on this path which have been here earlier, and I think that's a little bit bizarre because usually people don't come here too often. I'm very used to going out here and there's no one around, so that was interesting. As I'm walking, the snow's now going directly into my face and it actually made it a bit annoying, to be honest. I stopped for a moment to try and figure out the direction of it so I can try and avoid it when I hear a howling off. Now I don't know exactly where it's coming from, but there seems to be another little trail where you can cut through going off of the main path, but I decide not to follow it just in case. I was kind of expecting to run into some crazy dog walker or something, but they never showed up, so I think this is a little bit odd. Eventually I come up to one of the trail signs and I can see some of the wildlife that lives here, and I think to myself, well, there's definitely nothing that's going to hunt me, as it's just birds and things like that. But I do wonder what the sound is that I heard. Now, I go a little bit further along and eventually the snow picks up even more now. It felt a little bit different and almost like the weather had become more hostile now. Again, I'm not a spiritual person, but it almost started to feel a bit more like the air was different here. Now, the only way I can describe what I was seeing if you haven't been in the woods at night in the snow is everything sort of looks like an infinite dream. It's almost like somebody's made an unlimited map of just forest, snow, woods, and it's just going to keep on going forever. You do have to be careful out here though, because if you really go off the path, then you don't want to be stuck out in the cold like this. As you can imagine, trying to get a fire going is not easy at the best of times, let alone here. As I'm thinking of this, I hear sounds up above again. I can hear somebody scurrying through the tree line. Well, at least that's what I think it is. And I pause for a second, and I go to switch my flashlight with one that has more of a focus beam. And I kid you not, as this is happening, I can see what appears to be a really small kind of lanky armed person scurrying through the woods. And I take a moment to figure out what this is. I quickly flicker on my other light, which is more powerful, and I don't see anything, so I just put it down to my mind going a little bit loose. I do have to say, I've never seen anything like this, and I think this is really weird. Annoyingly, my eyes didn't adjust well enough in the darkness to actually see this thing, and I have tried telling this part to some other people, but again, they all just say, oh yeah, it's just a rabbit. But I mean, come on, I've seen rabbits, and this thing had lanky arms. I can only describe it as if a person was about 3 feet tall, had a very large torso, and very long skinny arms that dragged the floor. But I don't know where they've gone. I tried looking around for more footprints, but I can't see anything, and this gives me a little bit of adrenaline to pick up the pace. I knew I'd gone out here hoping to find some ghosts and things, but now I wasn't so sure if I actually wanted to find them or not. Now again, I can see a mist form just in front of me, then slowly disappear again. It was a white mist, and it's really like somebody's just breathed in front of me and then vanished. I try and replicate how I was standing a few moments ago and pace backwards and start breathing more heavily to see if it was me, but there's nothing there. Pretty confused at this point, but I decided to just pick up the pace more. Now I had one other scary experience before from being out in the woods I can think of now, but this was more to do with an animal than anything supernatural. I remember I'd gone somewhere and a big old moose appeared and it was extremely close to me. For whatever reason it didn't really take notice of me, it just looked at me for a second, but I remember that scared me. But that feeling that I had was kind of beginning to loom over me, and I started to wonder if maybe there was a large animal like that around. Now this is when I noticed the first strange structure. It's something that I hadn't realised before. It's a large wooden structure that looks like 3 trees, kind of in a Stonehenge shape, but a little bit less spread out. This is really weird. It's like they've been carved by hand and placed upright. And what was really bizarre is that there isn't much snow in the middle. It seems like the ground is staying particularly dry here, and not snow forming. Now, I think this is really bizarre because, well, where I am there shouldn't be anything like this. I would have been aware of it too, and I don't understand why I'd never noticed it before. It now becomes apparent that I'm not actually on the main path. I switch off my flashlight once more, and I just take a few seconds to take in everything. I'm trying to give my eyes some time to adjust to the darkness, and I look down at my battery. It's dropped down to 40% on the main flashlight thing, and that's a bit of a worry. Batteries drain pretty quick in the cold, and now I notice that there's more of the mist forming up ahead of me. I actually take a second just to assess what this actually is, but I can't figure out what it is. It's almost like a group of people standing there, kind of just like breathing or talking normally, but there's no one around, and it only seems to be spawning in a specific spot. Now, I once more get closer and try and figure out what this is, but I just can't. Now it reminds me of a story of what one of my other fire ranger friends had told me about. Sorry to go off topic, but I think it's important because it might have been linked to what I saw. Now, one of my good friends had been working in the service for quite a number of years, and he would always try and prank us and pretend there was scary things out there. We never believed him, and sometimes he would actually get us with Halloween masks and stuff, and that was pretty creepy. But I remember one day that he come up to us and he looked very freaked out. He said, "Guys, I saw something and I don't know what it is." We ask him to elaborate and he refuses for a while, but because I'm good friends with him, eventually he decides to tell me what he saw. Apparently, he thought he saw a fire, so he went over to investigate it. Apparently it was just a small red cherry glow, but that could be the start of something. Just as he got to where it was, it suddenly went out, and there was a very big mist that appeared, which is like a smoky white colour. It almost looked like there was a huge fire in terms of the amount of smoke, but nothing was burning. He said it stayed here for literally 3 or 4 minutes as he stared at this bewildered, until eventually it just vanishes. Now the reason that I'm telling you this is because it was incredibly similar to what I saw, in terms of how he described it, the way that it moved, the slight opaqueness of it, everything was just weird. I stood there for what must have been about a good 4 minutes before eventually I decided that, yeah, I'm probably gonna have to press through this now. I couldn't be waiting around here all day, and I decided to be brave and walk through it. I actually held my breath just before I did so because I didn't know if it was maybe some kind of dangerous chemical or something that had leaked out, but there wasn't anything. I eventually make it through after what felt like ages, to be honest, and I was actually gasping for breath. It probably took me a good 20 seconds to get through this. Eventually when I do, I turn around to try and figure out where it had gone, and I can't see it. I do think that I can see something just moving off into the distance, but I can't be sure. It was almost like a group of people had vanished, but one of them had just went off into the woods. Now, I'm a little bit freaked out, but again, I was here alone, so there's not really too much I can think of this. Now, I do notice something else very weird. There seems to be lots of really bizarre shaped footprints going off in different directions. They're all kind of like the hoof shaped, like the thing I'd seen earlier, but they're really far spread apart, like something quite tall had been walking. But it's walking as though that it's in complete arrogance to the trees that are there, like they don't exist, and again, I don't know what kind of animal could have done this. Now, I walk on. I haven't really got a direction this time. I just know that I need to keep going. I have a feeling that I'm in a bad spot, and that's when I see something. This time I was certain that I was seeing something that was actually there. It was very far away, but I can only describe this as something which is completely black, with these white tusk arm things that was about 4 feet tall that hops around. I only saw this for a couple of seconds and it vanishes, but it's probably the scariest part of the encounter for me. I don't want to describe it as like a demonic thing because again I'm not spiritual, but I don't really know what this was. It's like a really weird creature that would stand awkwardly and almost like it was just bent out too far and shouldn't be balanced, but it was. I flash on both the lights at the same time searching for it, but again I don't see anything. I then realise that I'm not too far from a lake that I'm actually familiar with, and that's when I noticed a strange glow coming from the other side of it. Now, it was kind of like a glow of like a power plant would give, I guess, in the horizon. Almost like heat waves of light just emanating out slowly, again in the white colour, but almost having more of an energy to it. I decide that I have to investigate. Now, I was actually stupidly close to the shoreline now, because one slip, one twisted ankle, and I could go through the ice and no one would get me here. I'd die of hypothermia before rescuers could find me, but the sense of adventure had taken over. I turn my light around again, and I can't see anything. For a second, I'm sure I can make out the faint glow of 2 eyes, but I don't know if this is just an animal, so I'm not too worried. There's also strange sounds coming from over where that the light is, and it's almost like lots of people talking played backwards, really far off, really far, like barely audible, but I could hear it. The forest was pretty quiet at this time, and I think it made it worse. I'm constantly flashing around with my lights, trying to just get whatever this is to show up more, but I can't see anything. Now, I know some people are asking me, why wasn't I more scared of that weird thing I'd seen? And to be honest, I can't tell you that. It was almost like I was drawn into something, and a mixed personality had taken over where I was seeing weird things and they weren't welcoming, but they weren't worrying for whatever reason, like I had to go on further. I decided that I need to keep up my pace now, but I have some pretty good thoughts and I think, well, I don't want to fall in the water and die, so I go off now. At this part, the trees are a lot thicker than before, and that was a bit more reassuring. But that lake, I'm constantly hearing sounds from over where that lake is, and I just cannot for the life of me figure out what they are. I actually can't remember the sounds too well, and I don't know if it was because I was in a bit of a heightened state during the experience, but I just remember they were weird sounds, like scratching and things like that. Now I know it could have easily been a group of people on drugs or God knows what, but given the weather conditions, I think that's extremely unlikely. Again, this is something one of my incredible colleagues told me that that's what this could have been, and joking that it was green men and aliens, but I don't understand it, because again, these people are so interested to hear what I was saying, and maybe they're denying it because they're scared of what I'm telling them, or just refuse to believe it, but that annoyed me. And I've always been somebody who has the ability to break down the physics of things. If something has happened, I don't immediately go to the irrational explanation. I think with a scientific mind, but it failed me this day, because I can't come up with much for what was happening to me. Now I continue on as the snow gets a little bit thicker now. I think the reason for this might have been because there weren't as many thin trees blocking out all of the snow to capture it. Just quite a few big ones with more space in between, but it did actually make my legs hurt. I noticed my knees are quite cold, so my remedy for this is once again to pick up the pace. I clear some of the snow that's actually settled on me, and I actually feel a bit better now. There's quite a big drop off down to the lake now, and I realise that I'm going uphill. What was weird though is that I haven't been to this area before, and I can't really find it. Even since I've been back to the forest again, I've never been able to find this exact spot. Now, it was like somebody had described the area that I was in to somebody else, and they'd tried to make it but not done it exactly the same, and you kind of know deep down that you're not in exactly the same place, but there's enough familiarity for you to feel confident in the situation. Now, as I get closer to the light that I could see, I realise that this definitely isn't the moonlight, because it was kind of flickering like it had an electrical energy to it, and was kind of flashing around into the clouds a little bit, not like lightning, but kind of like the northern lights, and that was what I find really bizarre. Just the whole energy of whatever this was is like nothing that I've ever seen before. A little bit scared now, I start to slowly pan around trying to see anything, but I can't find a thing. Every so often I hear sounds of movement behind me, but I can't be sure what this is. I decide that I just need to keep it moving, and that was one of the things that made me feel more safe in this situation now. I eventually come up onto the bend and I start approaching towards where the light is directly now. Now again, I'm not too scared or shy of adventures, so I have to keep pressing forward one step at a time. I do notice something odd, and that's that there aren't any steps up here. I know people might not have gone here in the daytime, but it does seem weird because there was just so many earlier that I'd seen pretty much everywhere. The snow had actually slowed down a little bit, and it wasn't as abrasive on my face, and this was quite nice. My nose and toes always seem to suffer, especially in the cold, along with my hands. I think I have a problem where they don't have very good blood, or they just seem to switch off in the cold, but it made the going a little bit tough and less comfortable. Now, had I found the ghost that I was looking for? Not just yet. So I decide that I need to go towards the light, but again, the way that the light is kind of bouncing off the clouds, almost like it's the northern lights, was just really strange. I was incredibly drawn into this, almost like I was looking at a hypnotist's watch. It was incredibly beautiful, but just really weird. I didn't know if it was related to an electrical storm, but it wouldn't really make sense for me. I have seen something bizarre while working on the service, so again, a little bit similar to this. I remembered one time that I was working. I was actually in the station and I just made myself a coffee. I went to step outside and had a look around at the sky at night just because it's so beautiful, and I do notice something odd. There's almost like a large blue electrical ball of light in the sky. It's opaque and not really visible, and it only lasted for a few seconds, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. A few of my colleagues had actually reported seeing it as well while on duty at the exact same time that I did, and this kind of had the same characteristics, but it wasn't identical. But I want to find out what this is, and I wasn't as scared as I was before. Now the closer I get, there's something else I notice which is pretty bizarre, and that's that the sky seems to be kind of imitating this very loosely. It's almost like somebody turned on a pulse of electricity through the clouds above me. It's almost like the northern lights are above the whole sky now, but extremely faint, but the same colour as the clouds, so again it's almost like they were pulsating a bit. I did get scared because there's a eye condition that someone in my family has, which is actually a little bit similar to this, but I've been tested for it multiple times since and after this event, and it's always come up clear. But in the moment I was pretty scared because I really worry about having issues with my vision. Now, luckily it turned out it wasn't my eyes, and I quickly did some tests by looking at the ground and things that weren't moving to realise that nothing was off. But why was the sky moving? I wasn't so sure what was happening, but I wasn't that far away now from where I needed to be. That's when I noticed another wooden structure. It's similar to what I've seen before, but it kind of formed more of a hexagon type of shape. Every so often I would see these on either sides of the trail, and they seemed to be increasing in frequency as I got closer to the light. I only saw about 3 more of them, but again, never seen it since. I stop for a moment, and I can see my breath on my light as I take my mask down just to try and get a better feel of what was happening. I shine the torch around, but again, I don't see much of anything. Don't know what I was expecting to see. I've just got the glow dead ahead of me now, and I know I have to get there. It's not much longer now before I'm there, so at least I've got that to look forward to, and I can eventually start heading back. I'm not sure how far I'd actually come at this point, but I've probably been walking for about a good 50 or 60 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but usually you'll feel it more than I was in this situation, because walking in the snow is actually really difficult sometimes, and the cold can kind of zap out all of your energy. Now, I'm not too far away from where this is, and I can hear the voices again. It sounds like whispering. I can make out the odd word or two, but nothing seems to be in a language that I understand. It's definitely in a language though, and it hasn't increased in volume or anything since when I first heard it earlier. I don't know if it was there the whole time because I kind of just zoned out to it, but I suddenly noticed it much more than I had done earlier. And again, this is pretty weird to me because, like I said, I've never heard anything like it, and it was a bit creepy. Now, I eventually come up to the last clearing where the light should be, and I'm quite excited to get here. There seems to be lots of footsteps here everywhere, so I'm pretty convinced that I've made it back onto the main path now. I've got a good feeling now, and I know that there must be somebody there, so I feel pretty happy. So, what do? Take my steps around it. I can definitely hear the voices on the right side of me now, and I keep stopping every couple of seconds to approximate exactly where it is. Every so often I see movement up ahead of me, and I'm convinced that it's people out here now, so I feel much more relaxed and reassured. I'm now going down the last straight part that I have to go to, with the trees kind of forming an arch above me, and the snow still everywhere around me. Now, some people have asked me why did I keep going and what was I actually doing out there. That was my friends at work earlier, and I don't know. I guess it kind of felt like I'd been there for too long and I was at least going to get something out of it, and yeah. So, I continue up and I eventually find where the clearing is, and I realise that I've only got about another 20 feet of a walk to figure out what this is, and I can see movement again. I decide that the best thing to do in this situation is just to slowly sneak up on who or whatever it is up ahead of me. Now yes, I've got them, I think. I can see some more lights ahead too. I'd see 2, then 3, then they go out. I don't have my light on at this point because I want the element of surprise. The snow is coming against me, but not directly in my face, so this is pretty pleasant. Now, I come up to where I can hear the voices finally getting louder and louder, and my excitement is growing. It feels like I've been here for too long trying to figure out what is actually going on, and I'm gonna get my taste of it soon. I am kind of looking over my shoulder every so often though, because I do hear sounds like I'm being followed. Again, I keep thinking I'm seeing movement, but there's not much of anything when I focus, so I try not to think of it. I don't actually have my torch on now, so I can't verify the fact that there's nothing there. But again, I just presumed it was people. And I thought, well, they haven't said anything to me, and I'm not disturbing them, so why are they going to be annoyed at me? It was almost like an overconfidence, and eventually, I come up to the tree line and the clearing. I start going a lot slower now as I get closer and closer to where I can hear them all. Now the chanting is still illegible, and I take my first step up, and I look around and I can see what must be hundreds of people all standing around the edge of some kind of clearing. They've all got their hands raised up and they're making some weird chanting sound. Now they're not actually that close to me, so it's pretty difficult to make out how tall they are, but these things seem really small. I say things because I don't know if they were people unless they were on their knees, but that's what it looked like. I start to shake a little bit as I feel a lot more like I'm in danger now. I decide that I'm gonna slowly turn my flashlight on for a second and figure out what this actually is. My eyes adjust more and more to the darkness every couple of seconds, and I notice something wrong. They don't look like normal people. The shape of them's all wrong and their arms are too long. And they're all either wearing some white things on their arms, but it looks very pointy, just like the things I'd seen earlier. I try as best I can to slowly flicker on the torch, but I cannot do it. Again, I start shaking more and more and try and press it, but nothing happens. I keep on and on flicking until eventually it flashes on, and for a split second I can see these things. They're like very dark small creatures with weird pointy arms, all facing up to the sky making some weird sounds. Their mouths are what really scare me. It's like just a circle with lots of jagged teeth. And just as I'm taking this all in, they suddenly vanish, and so does the sounds. I quickly fire the torch around everywhere trying to see where they've gone, but I can't see anything. I can hear my heartbeat in my ears like a constant rhythmic drum. And then, a few moments later, I hear movement, rustling and the sounds as though hundreds of people are all coming towards me suddenly, and I take off. I turn my torch on and quickly dart up ahead of myself, constantly looking over my shoulder with the torch. What I have just seen, I don't know, but I knew that I was in danger and had to get out of there. Luckily, I can retrace my footprints for most of the journey until I get away from the clearing. I can hear the sounds are still coming after me, just much slower than me, but they're still coming. I stop for a second and fire the torch around everywhere but can't see anything, and I drop it. Now, I managed to drop it not only into the snow, but face first, and that also means there's no light illuminating back at me, it's kind of buried. Just as I say to myself, you've got to be kidding me, I can hear something else not far up ahead of me. So I take off. Thank God I actually brought the other torch with me, because I'm absolutely certain at the fact that I would have had cardiac arrest otherwise. Now, the only problem I've got is the other torch isn't that easily accessible right now. I put it away when I was trying to hide and be not heard, but now I'm starting to think that wasn't really a good idea. And because I've had this on and so close to my face, I haven't really adjusted to the dark, and I don't know where I'm going. I used to be quite good at long distance cross country, so I have that in my favour. But I soon realise those years are way behind me, and I come up to a point where there's two paths. One's much smaller and seems untrodden but should be closer to where I need to get to. The other is what seems to be closer to where the light is, and I have to choose the latter. Now I take off down this path, and I keep fumbling trying to get the other torch on, but for whatever reason I just can't seem to do it. I don't know if it was for the fact that it was in the cold for too long, but in those moments it just would not come back to life again, and I'm just hitting it on my palm constantly. Now it's extremely difficult to navigate in this moment. I think I know where I'm going, but I can't really tell. There's clearly lots and lots of different footprints on this path, and I can't tell if they're normal or not because I was rushing so much, but it gives me some reassurance that I must be going in a relatively good direction to escape whatever this is. Now I should mention at this point that the sounds are long gone. I'd absolutely blitzed something that seemed like it couldn't go much quicker than a light walking pace, but it didn't matter. I don't know what was chasing me or why. I don't know what I'd just disturbed. Eventually, I flick my torch on again, and I illuminate the rest of the way back. I turn it off again quickly because I'm not sure how good the battery is and I really needed to conserve it. I stop for a few moments to collect my breath and look around me, and I think I know my bearings now, and I start to walk. The only reason that I had to walk now is because I was so out of breath and exhausted from moving in the snow that I genuinely was going to have to crawl the rest of the way out otherwise. I now make it up to another clearing where I can see the lake. I look around everywhere, and what's really weird, I can't see the light glow that I saw earlier. It's genuinely nowhere. I was convinced that I should still at least be able to see that out of all things, but there's literally nothing. I don't get it. And the sky, it still didn't look right, but it wasn't like before. So where did the light go? I didn't have much time to focus on it, but I was truly perplexed, and this is something that I still think about now. I managed to get my torch on again, and I don't know, it sounds stupid, but I was trying to recharge whatever energy it was and fire it around everywhere, hoping to see the light again, just to know it was there. But again, I don't see anything. Now, I'm pretty spooked out now, but I have to keep going. I eventually make it into a more familiar area, and I'm actually feeling confident finally. I've adopted more of a walking pace because I was a little bit worried that if anyone was out there and I ran up on them, they might think I was trying to attack them. I do stop constantly though, and look around, desperately trying to see something or anything around me, but again, I can't see anything or anyone. I was desperately hoping that I'd see a group of people just to explain what I'd seen, or at least to be able to tell somebody, but I can't see anything. The snow's picked up a little bit more now, and it wasn't pleasant. I realised too that I must have been out of here for quite a long while because the battery's virtually entirely drained on the torch. I know because it's gone pretty dim. I probably have the worst torch in the world because when the battery's low it goes really dim to conserve it, but it doesn't last very long, so what's the point? The other light that I have is far superior, but that's long gone. I decide to leave it for whatever's out there to enjoy it. I know I'm never seeing that thing again. I'm someone who usually hates losing things too, but I was so scared I didn't even think about trying to recover it. Now, the trees are getting thinner and thinner, and that gives me a pretty good idea that I'm not too far away from where I need to be now. I can't be 100% certain that I'm back to safety, but This is a pretty good indicator of it being the case. Now, I continue this walking pace and I'm constantly looking behind myself. Now, momentarily, I start shaking again and don't know why. Then suddenly, I realise I hear something making a screeching sound. It's kind of at a medium volume, but it sounds like it's coming from exactly behind where I was. I'm not so worried now because with a few steps, I'm eventually back to where the forest ends and I'm not too far from safety. I look around for anything to have been following me, but I can't see anything. And I quickly make my way over to my car. I start it up, turn the lights on full, and take one last look into the forest and I can't see anything. I get back into my car and drive the rest of the way home, completely in shock about the whole experience. Now, I really don't know what happened to me that day, and I truly don't like sharing my story with colleagues at work because they don't really listen to me, but I know what I saw, and I don't know what it was. It could have been spiritual, it could have been anything, but I sure as hell don't have a clue what that was, and that scares me.